Would everyone please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Miss Inga, roll call. Where's Miss? Oh. You got her?
Chairman Dove.
Present.
Mr. Davidson.
Present.
Mr. Bosworth.
Present.
Mr. Lane.
Present.
Lieutenant Governor Nungesser. Mr. Alpert. President Jewell.
Present.
Mr. Dow. Mr. Jordan. Mr. Bourgeois.
Here.
Mr. Hidalgo.
Here.
Ms. Cormier.
Here.
Mr. Carville.
Here.
Mr. Lane.
Here.
Representative Zarang. Senator Hastings.
Present.
Thank you. We have a quorum. Approval of agenda. Motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Motion made by Mr. Bourgeois, second by Mr. Hidalgo. All in favor? Any opposed? Second motion by Mr. Hidalgo. First motion by Mr. Hidalgo, second Mr. Bourgeois. All in favor? Any public comment on agenda? Any objection to the motion? Hearing none. No objection. The motion is approved. Approval of the minutes. Motion to approve the minutes. Mr. Corville, second by Mr. Hidalgo. All in favor?
Aye.
None opposed. Second motion, it's okay, done. Any public comments? Any objections to the motion? Hearing none, the motion is approved. Old business, any members would like to go over any old business? I'd like to, first of all, I'd like to thank Governor Jeff Landry and Jock Thibodeau with the GOSEF for a great job, well done. The Unified Command, me being one of the cabinet members of Unified Command, we met every morning and it went off without a hitch. They Mr. Thibodeau was able to supply the pumps, sacks of sands or whatever they needed, generators, and they got them out expeditiously. And my hat's off to Mr. Thibodeau for a job well done, and to the governor for his leadership and handling it. And it went well. We did flyovers. We had the core flyovers. We had General Peoples down. We had naturally the Colonel and other members of the Corps inspecting everything, the levees across the state, and it really went well. It was organization. It clicked every morning, and we got everything done. All departments, all secretaries were available, and everyone was on top of everything. What a great concerted effort by everyone. And of course, we've got some cleanup effort and a few things going on. And with everything else, we had 11 foot of water coming to Terrebonne and parts of Lafourche, and successfully held it off. So we were very happy with the levee system and floodgates in that areas. And other parishes had 3, 4, 5, 6 foot of water come in. And we had a list. We had some flooding, but it was mostly internal flooding. Nothing to do with the levee system. So it was very successful, if you could call a hurricane successful. But it was very successful operations, and hats off to everyone. And I'd also like to take this opportunity to wish Inga happy birthday. If everyone would say happy birthday.
Happy birthday.
Inga's been here long before me. She really runs this. I just sit up here doing the meetings, okay? So.
And yes, she's only 25 years old.
But thank you for everything, Ing, and you've been great, and thank you for putting it together. And with that, we're going to move on. CPRA, oh yes, I'm sorry, Mr. Corville, go ahead. Yes.
Yep. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was going to ask, this just really just kind of popped in my head whenever you brought up this, the hurricane. It seems like we have a little bit of an opportunity given where this one made landfall in proximity to the active deltas of the Wax Lake and the Atchafalaya. I was going to ask maybe Mr. Leday or maybe someone looking at, listening to this from the university system to look at maybe looking at that area in pre-storm, post-storm, and then the recovery phase to show how the coast, that particularly in this region, at least those two regions of the two active deltas, have the ability to respond. I think we probably missed some opportunities. I mean, if you can find, like you said, Chairman, a positive out of having hurricanes, there might be an opportunity to look at areas of active delta building, active areas of freshwater influence, and how those respond to storm events and how quickly they recover, being that they have that ability. It might help in future planning and development and utilization of fresh water as we move forward into the future. But I think it's an opportunity we wouldn't want to squander for maybe some research and some evaluation, even if it's just satellite imagery looking at emergent marsh recovery and response after those kind of, episodic events. I just wanted to put that on the radar screen. Maybe that might spur some thought and maybe get some students or somebody on it, kind of looking at it and documenting it over time. I think it's an opportunity. No reason to miss it. And if we can spin a positive out of having a storm, this might be one of those. Thank you.
Good, very good question. Mr. Leday, would you like to field that question?
Yeah, we certainly agree, Mr. Corville. I think we fully intend on doing that. You'll see today our first order of business is the damage assessments on the levees and flood protection systems, but we certainly we think it's a good opportunity to study that area and intend on doing that.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Okay, we have the CPRA implementation hurricane Francis recovery, Executive Director Glenn Leday with CPRA.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. Do you want to do the approval of minutes first? Or?
We did that.
Yes. Okay, thank you. Thank you. Well, appreciate the opportunity. Unfortunately today, prior to the implementation update, we have to go over the Hurricane Francine impacts. And as we all know, the devastating impacts from the hurricanes we're all familiar with, whether it's storm surge or rainfall flooding or land loss or damage to infrastructure. We unfortunately have to give you those updates today. And so our thoughts and prayers go out to those impacted by the storm. But as Chairman Dove said, we were pleased to see the flood protection systems that we've implemented provide protection to citizens and perform very well. So we'll go a little bit about go over a little bit of those impacts as well as some of the success that we had in flood risk reduction and storm surge reduction. But of course, we've still got devastating impacts across the state that we'll cover. And so with that, we've got really just the first thing want to highlight just the types of storms that hit. Every storm is different, and so with that, as we jump into these impacts, just want to highlight how devastating this can be, even for something like a Cat 2 storm like Hurricane Francine. And so we partner with the Corps of Engineers and UC San Diego and other entities to manage a coastal data information program for some offshore buoys. We've got 2 existing. We're installing a 3rd in the Breton Sound Basin, and so we have the opportunity to look at those impacts. And so you see there from our CDIP gauge 255 offshore, we were able to record significant wave heights, wave periods, as well as peak wave heights. And so, unfortunately, through this storm, we were able to recognize the largest significant and max peak wave height that was ever recorded at gauge 255 since we put it in place several years ago. And so you could see there the significant wave height was roughly 4.2 meters, which is 14 feet in height, but the maximum wave height was 23.7 feet or 7.22 meters. So that was the largest max wave height that was ever recorded. So even in a Cat 2 storm, we're seeing really significant wave heights that ultimately impact our coast, and it's the reason why we do all of this work. And so just wanted to highlight that. As I mentioned, we're going to be installing another gauge on the eastern side of the state, and then this particular gauge, 255, is actually managed and run by the Corps. So it's really great to have that data, but it's unfortunate to see those impacts. So just want to highlight the differences that we can see in all of these storms, even in Cat 1 and Cat 2 storms. With the aftermath of Hurricane Francine, the governor and his staff were hard at work to evaluate the damage and begin the recovery. We were able to fly across the state and view those damages and interact with the local parishes and levee districts. So I want to give an opportunity to those on the board to express the recovery efforts that they've been going through. With those direct impacts initially to Martin City and Terrebonne, I'd like to start there with Mr. Hidalgo to provide a few thoughts on the impacts that you had, Mr. Hidalgo, in St. Mary Parish and the recovery efforts that are ongoing.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Got it. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Luday. Yes, sir. It impacted St. Mary Parish and maybe not as tough as we thought it was going to be. We originally anticipated some water elevations of like 11 feet in the Franklin Canal area, but as the hurricane moved to the east, it relieved that, and actually what was going to be 11 ended up being 2. So we're thankful for that. Okay. So just some of the things that we did. The local levee extension flood wall is an aluminum structure that we install. It was installed on Monday. At noon, we started the construction or the installation of it, and it was completed by Tuesday noon. The culvert gates were opened at 10 p.m. the night of the storm to allow water out, and we started removing the structure on the 11th, which was the day after the storm, and it was completed at noon the following day. So that is what we call the Yoakley Extension Levee, which is a portable structure, aluminum structure. So that protected the areas of Metal Shark and Gulfcraft, which are 2 shipyards that are located on the Yoakley Canal, or the Sherrington Canal, excuse me. Next, we closed the Bayou Teche structure, and we closed it at 4 p.m. on Monday, and reopened it again on Friday, the 13th at 7 a.m. So that structure, and by the way, all the structures I'm talking about right now are structures that have been built in the last 10 years and built by the levee district. So with the help of CPRA and other funding that we got, we were able to put these structures in. So the West Calumet floodgate was open to let water out of the system, as well as the Hanson Canal. We utilize the flap gates on the Hanson Canal. The Hanson Canal gate we closed on 9/9, and it was safe to travel to them by 11 p.m. And on 9/11, we opened them up to let water out of the system. The Yellow Bayou structure was closed and pumped down, and it was reopened on the 13th. It was closed on the 9th and reopened on the 13th. The Franklin Canal was closed on the 10th and reopened on the 16th, and we had to wait a while in order for water elevations to subside to be able to open and equalize the pressure so we could open the gate. And then the largest structure we have is the Bayou Chene structure, which was closed on the 10th and reopened during high tide on the 14th. So we had to wait for a high tide in order to equalize the pressure on both sides of the structure in order to open it. We did open the sluice gates on the 12th to allow water to flow from the protected area into the flood area, as we call it. And but the structure was finally fully open, and to help relieve the rainwater that accumulate behind the structure. This is a report from our operations manager, Michael Bacata, and anytime anyone needs any information in the St. Mary Levy District area about operating of structures and all, Mike is available, or myself, okay? Something else I'd like to bring up, that we saw some flooding from overtopping in Lake Palourde, and yes, we did have the wave run up in Lake Palourde, which you can see from the gauge readings, and so we need to get help to get protection to the Lake Palourde area. The Atchafalaya River was impacted and going to require some additional dredging going forward. In fact, I talked to Mac Wade last night, and he said that the Corps is bringing some more dredges in order to open up the system. Other structures that were closed and open were the gates along the Berwick side and the Morgan City side of the Atchafalaya River. The only flooding we had was we did have some waters from Lake Palourde that topped the existing structure. And other than that, it was just rainwater from, I'm told that we had from 20 to 22 inches of rain in the Morgan City area. So it really impacted the drainage system. That's it, sir. Any questions?
Yes, ma'am.
I just want to, for point of clarification, Mr. Hidalgo and Mr. Leday, if you could speak to the great work of CPRA in your parish, what would it have looked like if this storm would have hit 11 years ago without all the storm protection you have? Just to let the people know who are viewing that this board has done a lot of great work in a lot of parishes over the years. And I just think it's worth noting that you probably would have had massive flooding if those mitigation efforts weren't in place. And just to kind of talk a little bit about what that might have looked like 11 years ago.
Yes, ma'am. As I said, all these structures that I told you about were structures that were basically funded during this period. So CPRA helped us with the funding on all those, whether it was GOMESA funding for the Bayou Chene or whether it was other funding, direct funding, for example, like the Bayou Teche or the other areas. So yes, we would have had a tremendous impact. The people would have not have been protected like they were, and it was for us. Is there ever a successful storm? Yes, this I guess was a successful storm. We were able to fight it, and without CPRA, we would not have been there. Okay. Yes, ma'am. Exactly. Mitigation work. Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Corville.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to echo some of these thoughts and compliment the administrators of St. Mary Parish and CPRA and everybody involved. But so we have a fair amount of property in St. Mary Parish, and a lot of our people live in St. Mary Parish, Franklin, Morgan City. I just wanted to just say a word of compliment those folks and their resiliency. Just a quick story. Our alligator season was set to happen starting the bait Saturday and start on Sunday, the few days after the storm. And talked to my guys. Some of them lost their shingles and lost power and what have you. I said, look, we can delay a few weeks. They're like, what else are we going to do? Like, this is part of our culture. We're ready to get after it. But because of a lot of the measures that you guys have taken, they weren't as worried about their homes, and they were able to get on about their regular daily lives. And so my guys went back out on Thursday, the day after the storm, marsh looked pretty good, water was down, and they got after it. And they said, well, I mean, we can sit in our houses without power. We can go out and enjoy the marsh and the fruits of St. Mary Parish and go on about our daily lives and kind of a little sense of normalcy. So compliments. And even a testament to the resiliency of the people of that area in this state and how deep our culture is related to our coast and the fruits that it provides. And I just wanted to recognize those guys and ladies and their families because they're really some tough people, can take care of themselves, and really appreciate what you guys have done for them in their region.
Mr. Dowdle?
Yes, sir. Thank you very much. And it's a team effort, no doubt about it. And, really part of the team for us was to be able to file a CPRA, okay, priceless, okay? And that effort alone allowed us to follow elevations and predictions and know what we had to do. So it's all coming together. And, but thank goodness it wasn't worse than what it was. We fared well. Amen. Yes, sir. Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate the comment.
And Mr. Dowdle, if I could say, back when we were on the CPRA board, I was with you years ago, and how long would it used to take you to close the Bayou Chene? How long it used to take y'all to build that?
So
Put that barge in place?
we closed Bayou Chene 3 times with temporary structures, putting barges in, 300, 400-foot barges, and then driving sheet pile across the face of the barge. First time it took 10 days and about $12 million. We learned how to do it later. Of course, we left some structure in, which was all permitted, and we could do it in like 8 days, okay, and only about $8 million. But we did it 3 times, and if you add it up, it was 8 and 12. So we spent a good bit of money and time and sweat, and there was always the threat. And, needless to say, the first time we put it in, I remember the comments about, you'll never get it done and it won't work. Okay, well, that's was proved this last hurricane again, that you can close off Bayou Chene, and it does work, and it protects the people.
And also, and it takes how many hours to close Bayou Chene now?
It took Mike pumped up the barge, which it takes about 20 minutes per foot to pump it up, okay? And he's got to pump up. It takes roughly 4 hours to get it up where he's getting ready to move it. And then to move it into place is, just an hour or so. And then to sink it, it's back down about 2 hours onto the sill. And then he's got about 4 more hours of ballasting down.
Right.
So it's hours rather than days, and it's done just to tell you how great it is. He dewatered the barge or the gate from the office, okay, and was able to monitor it with gauges and with cameras, and so that was all pressing a button. And like we said all along, we wanted to be able to press a button and close the gate.
And I believe the barge itself is 430 feet long?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
So the public will know it's 430 feet longer than the football field, that they swing in and closing off a navigable waterway.
Right.
Great job.
And looking at CPRA originally, we thought we were going to have about a 3 to 5 foot differential in water elevation, and ended up it wasn't that, okay? In 2011, we did hold back 5 feet of water. So, that's what the potential is to, hold back, 5 to whatever feet of water. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Ms. Cormier?
Just one other thing. Sorry, Mr. Leday, we kind of interrupted your implementation presentation, but just to let everybody know, I don't know what we spent on Bayou Chene and that permanent structure, but I would be interested to know how much mitigation damage would have occurred had we not had that. So this is taxpayer dollars working well for the citizens of Louisiana. So I just want to make that point. I might be interested in see some numbers as if that structure were not in place, what the damages would have been had they occurred with this most recent hurricane.
Yes, Mr. Hidalgo.
Okay, just a quick comment on that. Mr. Leday, we can furnish you with that information because we had done previous studies of with inundations, okay, as to what the potential loss would be. So, by the way, it was a $72 million project. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Probably
Yes.
save 3 times that.
Absolutely.
Thank you. And the board is clear, so Mr. Leday.
Yeah, thank you for those comments. I echo all of those. And to your point, Ms. Cormier, is up there, you'll see we were able to take an opportunity to fly with the governor and FEMA Administrator Deanna Criswell. So, she has asked for that exact information. Exactly what you're talking about is what we were showcasing to FEMA, and they are very interested in that. And then in addition to that, we were able to fly with Major General Peoples. She's a two-star general in Vicksburg at the Mississippi Valley Division, and showcase those exact same things and why we are continuing to push to finish these systems, these federal projects. And so, we took that opportunity to showcase all of those benefits. And so we're fully in tune with what you're saying.
Mr. Leday.
Yep. And so as, some of the same things that we would like to showcase is, as we look and go further east, similar to what we saw in the CDEP, as we look to Terrebonne Parish and the Morganza to the Gulf system, we were fortunate that all of the work that's been done over the last 15 to 20 years was in place. With this Hurricane Francine, we actually saw the most surge that the Morganza to the Gulf system has ever experienced. We believe that you could see there the peak gauge estimates at 10.37 and 10.35 feet at Bayou Terrebonne Sector Gate and Humboldt Canal Flood Gate were experienced, but we believe that was probably overtopped slightly, so the surge could have been in excess of 11 feet. So that is the most water that system's ever seen. And so certainly are fortunate that interim system is in place, and one of the reasons why we're stretching to the core all of the work that needs to be done to get that system completed. But happy to see that it mitigated those potential damages that could have come. In addition to that, you could see just from this storm the amount of debris and scour that has taken place on the Morganza to the Gulf system. TLCD, the Terrebonne Levee and Conservation District, is hard at work at cleaning all of that up in coordination with the Corps and with CPRA. But there's a lot of post-storm work to be done. Just some videos that flyovers that's been taken by Terrebonne Levee District. You'll see some of the scour that took place on the levee systems as well as the debris. You can see some scarping there on the flood side face of the levee. And so we will be working hard with TLCD and the Corps to get these repairs done, both for the remainder of this hurricane season as well as preparation for the next hurricane season. But always a lot of work to be done, but we are very fortunate that all of that work was done over the last 15 years. And you can see just the amount of debris on the flood side that will need to be cleaned up, and then the levee repairs that will need to be done. You can see there that's reach H3. And so all of those reaches are reaches that obviously we're actively working on to lift and get those up to interim elevations as the Corps takes that system over to build that to the 1% 100-year elevation. But just fortunate that was in place. Of course, there's always challenges on the inside of these systems, but just wanted to showcase some of the footage that we've taken there, and I'll let Mr. Chairman Dove.
Yeah, I just wanted to point out what y'all seeing is the levees with some of the these have vegetation, but those other slides you were seeing, they just finished lifting that up to 15 foot. So they actually took this hurricane with no vegetation, no grass, and they did exceptionally well for not having grass. So my hat's off to the levee board and Tony Alford, the president, and Angela Hidalgo, the director.
Thank you, Chairman Dove. And just one last comment before we move on to the next section is, as Mr. Hidalgo said, the CPRA operations staff worked hard throughout the storm. They helped to manage the LSU CPRA system with LSU on modeling surge impacts leading up to the storm, utilizing the National Hurricane Center tracks and other scenarios. And so I know that's information that all of the levee districts utilize to make operational decisions on closures. And so that system, along with the levee information management system that CPRA manages, is some of the work that both the state and all the local levee districts and parishes have put in to be able to prepare for these storms. So we'll keep building on that. We're working with GOSEP on improving that modeling, but there's always lessons learned that we'll loop back with y'all and try to improve. But fortunate that this infrastructure is in place. And of course, as you know, as we see in a lot of storms, there's other impacts that we're always trying to learn from and to try to mitigate and prevent. Some of those that we experienced in North Lafourche, I'll turn it over to Mr. Bourgeois and talk about the hard work that he and the North Lafourche Levee District have been doing to dewater the Kramer area and other areas of impact.
Okay, yeah, thanks, Glenn. I want to actually start by thanking Chairman Dove, Glenn, and a whole host of people at CPRA who were in constant contact with us before the event, during the event, and after the event. And so what we were doing Monday and Tuesday as the storm was approaching, we were looking at all of the forecasts for storm surge and what have you based off of the track, and actually considered, you know, if you look at that forecasting, there's a veer right 50 and a veer right 100, and veer right 50 turned to be pretty close to what actually happened in this event. So we gathered a lot of things we did, you know, from things that we had in lessons learned from Hurricane Ida as well. I'd say that overall, with regards to, and I'm not trying to diminish any internal flooding, because a lot of the internal flooding happened because of just the insane amount of rain that came with the storm, and it came on the heels of an area-wide 10 to 12 inches of rain already. So we prepared areas and did some pre-positioning of HESCO bags in by the Zalmans, and I can say that all of the things that we've gotten to levee-wise, you know, we've got probably 150 miles of levees in the North Lafourche Levee District, and they're small levees. A lot of them were built by the parish. Some of them were built by Lafourche Basin Levee District before we even had that part of the territory. A lot of them were not engineered levees. They were just reactionary levees in response to previous flood events. And so everything that we've gotten to, and CPRA works with us and tracks all of that, nothing got overtopped. And specifically, even in the Kramer community, where you see we had an earthen project in place, actually was in contractors on site when Ida hit. Ida just simply overwhelmed everything in that area, dumped Lake des Allemands right into that area. This time, we were expecting much more of a southerly wind for Kramer, but as we shifted to the east, which the storm did, then stalled, we had a lot of rain come in, and on the day that the storm was approaching on the 11th, I went in and, you know, we had done work in by the Zalmans area. We did work on Bayou False. We did a whole bunch of gate closures and things of that nature, and just didn't have a lot more time. We checked freeboard in Kramer, and if the storm would have stayed on track, we'd have been good. It didn't, so we had water come over the last part of the Kramer ring levee system that we have not gotten to yet. And we actually, not this past session, but the previous session, did get funding through statewide flood control to address this last piece, but we just got access to that funding maybe 2 months ago from not this session, but the previous session. DOT took over a year to assign a project number to this project so that we could get rolling. That's a problem that needs to be addressed because we would have been a little further down the road. Now, the water that came over at Bayou Road, which is the area adjacent to Bayou Buff, is a particularly difficult section. So it was the last phase of this. We found, I got there first light on the morning after the storm, so the 12th. And we did have a little bit water still continuing across the road. So we put in some HESCO bags. We put what we could. Within 2 hours, we had stopped the water. We requested the parish put additional pumps to help dewater things. I don't think enough water came over the road to make that big of a difference. It was mostly a rain event. It's a fairly large polder. But what we have there, and we have in several other areas, is an ongoing concern that I think a lot of people don't recognize. Even Friday afternoon, well, we were out of HESCO bags that we had access to ourselves. We put in a request through GOSEP, and when I put in a request through GOSEP, I can't put it in directly, even though we're a levy district, a political entity to state. We have to put it in through the parish. The parish put in a request, and I also contact my connections at CPRA to make sure they're tracking it for us. And I'm very thankful that they were, because the request was denied by GOSEP. It's Friday afternoon. The storm's over. We don't have any bags. So that wasn't an acceptable answer to the folks at CPRA, nor I. They found some bags at Lafourche Basin Levee District. In a few minutes, their director, Donna Ray Henry, called me and said, "Where do you want them?" And I said, "Well, come and get them." So we came get them. Their guys actually came out after. So thanks to Lafourche Basin Levee District for helping us get those bags. And we continued to put a longer-term solution for that area. And the reason that we did that there, and we also did on Pelche Drive in Raceland, and we kept things in the DeSalmons area, and we have to address another area right off of Highway 20 north of Thibodaux, is because that basin, a lot of people get to this point in the storm and say, well, it's over, it's done. For us, it's not. And Glenn, I know you and I have talked about this, but I want people to have this on the radar, and because FEMA has trouble getting their head around it, right? So the emergency event was, any actions taken between the 10th and the 12th. Well, we still have to take some actions, and here's the reason why. If we'll do a little thought exercise real quick. If you go from Bayou DeSalmons on Highway 90 and you go to the Bayou Lafourche Ridge, then you take the Bayou Lafourche Ridge up to Donaldsonville, then you take from Donaldsonville down the river back to Highway 3, Interstate 310, then back to 90 and back, inside of mostly St. Charles, but probably seven parishes in that mix. That's a 400,000 acre basin. And between the Wednesday before the storm and the Wednesday of the storm, somewhere between 1.5 feet and 2 feet of rain fell inside of that basin. 100% of that basin has to drain through Bayou DeSalmons. I mean, there's maybe a very infinitesimal amount that drains through Boutique, but pretty much 100% has to drain through there. And so that's 600,000 to 800,000 acre feet of water that has to drain through Bayou DeSalmons. When we've seen a situation in the past where we had 400,000 acre feet, it took every bit of 25 days to get that water out. So now we have, say, 700,000 acre feet. Now we've got to put this in a standard that everybody can think. That's the volume of the Superdome 244 times. That has to drain through Bayou DeSalmons. So for me, this event's not over, because all of that water still remains in that Upper Barataria Basin. The Upper Barataria Basin project is something we absolutely need to do, but we still need to contend with the water that remains in the Upper Basin in the same way that we had to contend with water that remained in Terrebonne Basin after the storm. So that's the situation I'm in. I'm expecting that the water in the basin will remain high, although we've working with the parish, and the parish did a fantastic job working with us through the storm, dewatered all the things inside the forced drainage areas, but it's the outside of the basin, the things that we don't have any backwater flood protection, we haven't gotten to them yet, we don't have the funding to get to them yet, and those areas that remain in jeopardy for the next 2 months, because until that water leaves the basin, we could have a north wind come through with a cold front. So we say a kootenai. We had a kootenai come through. Well, guess what? We're going to start blowing water around that basin, and that can threaten the areas that are there. So I'm going to be looking for some assistance to back up this position that we have, because we've had this issue with FEMA in the past where they said, well, that event's over. You can't be taking protective measures now, but the event's not over. The water is still there. And that's pretty much what I wanted to report on at this point. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bourgeois, and certainly I agree with your statements. And we talked. We'll continue to work and try to make improvements to the system. We did fly over this area with Ms. Criswell, and so we can get a better understanding of that system. But as you said, that rainfall that we experienced in this storm was significant. And lastly, just want to turn it over to President Jewell to talk about the impacts that he saw in St. Charles Parish.
All right. I think you had a slide. Can we put it on the St. Charles slide, or is that too far up? I thought I saw something.
Yep. Thank you.
Yeah, there. So that picture in the center you see there is Evangeline Road in Muntz. That's going to be protected by the West Shore Hurricane Protection Levy, but obviously that project is still ongoing. We have a project that'll take this water, everything you see here, and put it into the spillway, so we won't have to worry about the level of the lake to get that water out. And we think that once we do that project, which is also partially funded by CPRA, that we're going to be able to eliminate this water sat on this road until about Saturday morning because we needed the lake to go down to be able to get that water out. Otherwise, we were mostly just recirculating. The other two pictures you see are in Bayou Gauche, on Bayou Gauche Island. So that is outside of flood protection, but that just gives you an idea of how high the water got. I want to echo some of the things that Dwayne said. It was a tremendous amount of rain, especially when it got over portions of Lafourche and St. Charles and Jefferson Parish. The track was shifting east, but of course hurricanes rotate counterclockwise, so it was turning in on itself and just dumping a tremendous amount of rain. We talked with NOAA. We saw anywhere from 9 to 12 inches of rain in 2 hours in St. Charles Parish, and that equates to about between a 200 and a 500-year rain event. I am a little bit disgusted to say that I did have home flooding. It makes me sick when I see it. We had about 188 homes that took on water in the living portion of their home, about 280 that took on, another 100 that took on water in maybe like a garage or some sort of out structure that is not a part of the living portion of their home. But I am heartened to know that my parish was able to mostly stay dry. As far as keeping water out of homes, about 98% of the parish did not flood. So that's good. We've done a lot of work that has helped with that. But again, over in months, the lake drained slowly, and then we saw that water linger a little bit on Bayou Gauche Island. I do want to say thanks to Gordy for reaching out beforehand on the storm. And I'll tell you that the AdCirc modeling that we got was really on the money. I don't know about everywhere else as far as the AdCirc modeling that we get prior to the storm, if that actually turned out to be the case. But the basin was already high, and the upper Barataria Basin was already high from previous rains that we had the Thursday and Friday before. So we knew that it wasn't going to go out much, if at all, on low tides. Let's see. That's mostly it. I don't want to belabor anything too much. We did build a flood wall into Zalman's. We've got about 2,500 feet of it so far, and that helped us tremendously as far as us being able to prepare for the storm. Because of the AdCirc modeling we got, we decided not to do HESCO baskets, but rather just sandbag some of the lower gaps in our potato levee, which is at a +4. We saw about a +3. 3.3, 3.5, which was, again, pretty much in line with the AdCirc. I will tell you, Glenn, that we don't have a very good tide monitoring station in St. Charles Parish, in Bayou des Allemands, or in Bayou Gauche. So I know you were talking about some of those tide monitoring stations you have. If we can put one on the list in des Allemands, that would be a tremendous benefit for us being able to monitor that and getting some real world event. I did want to ask, do we take the AdCirc modeling and compare it to what we actually saw to refine the modeling?
Yes, we do that at post-storm.
Okay.
Yes.
Great. And then just last but not least, I want to thank, well, I'll say two things. I want to, again, echo what Dwayne said. Backwater flooding is a huge concern. A lot of places on the West Bank in St. Charles Parish, north of Booty, like Hawnville, Taft, Kelowna, those all gravity drain into that basin. So being able to keep water out of the basin, that storm surge out, is incredibly important. So I really hope we prioritize the Des Allemands floodgate. That's going to help with a lot of that storm surge getting into that basin. And then I just want to thank the local meteorologists, because they were calling that track well before the National Weather Service was, even like a day before. They were showing that shift east. And when you look at where at the beginning of the week on Monday, where that started really at landfall at Lake Charles, and you look at where it ended up, a really big shift. And so just thanks to the local meteorologists who were able to see all that.
Thank you. And and I will reiterate, we all identifying the funding for the Des Allemands floodgate. That is a priority of CPRA, along with the levee going to the west from there, and trying to get a temporary levee up until you can build the core levee all the way to the Bay Lafourche area. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Chairman Doug, President Jill. Yeah, we understand the plight, and we certainly feel with those residents. That's why we're aggressively trying to, one, build West Shore with the core, two is Upper Barataria, and then working with you on the pump station improvements. And so anything that we can do to help aggressively get those on the ground is what we're going to do.
At the core, give me my permit.
We're working on it. Yes, sir. Well, yeah, and so certainly, and beyond that, just working on any alternative measures for funding to get the additional work that we need done to prevent backwater flooding from occurring is certainly what we'll strive for. Just to finish off the impacts of Hurricane Francine, of course, these hurricanes are widespreading. We even had impacts in Plaquemines Parish as far east as Port Sulphur. We had a levee breach there, and Plaquemines worked hard to get those super sacks in place and dewater that area. As Mr. Bourgeois said, working with GOSEP, we were able to put in EOC requests for these areas and help on the dewatering process. So always lessons to be learned in these hurricanes, as we have different events that have different impacts, but we learn from each one of those, and we'll make improvements as we go. But certainly something that we'll continue to address is the impacts in Port Sulphur. And then, of course, Grand Isle being there on the forefront, we did have some back island tidal flooding that occurred. We were able to work with the town of Grand Isle and GOSEP and get that successfully dewatered. But the Corps, of course, has their big beach, dune, and breakwater project that is under construction. We worked with the Corps on Friday of last week to assess those impacts. We're doing additional surveys. Of course, some sand was lost in that process, but happy to report that the breakwater systems that had just been constructed, as well as the jetties and dune work was not impacted. So the Corps will continue to assess that to complete that project, and then of course we'll be coming in at a later time to finish that breakwater system, but happy to report that those impacts were somewhat minimal. And then finally, as you saw yesterday, the governor was able to get the president to approve the major disaster declaration for the state of Louisiana. You can see there we have individual assistance and public assistance for those parishes listed. Additional designations may be made at a later date if requested by the state, warranting the results of those damages. And then we have the hazard mitigation grant program for all areas in the state that are eligible to apply for that assistance. But it was good to see that major disaster declaration was made. And so with that, that'll conclude the Hurricane Francine impacts, Chairman, unless y'all have any further questions, and we can go into implementation.
Yes, Ms. Cormier.
Mr. Leday, I think I heard you correctly, but if you could repeat it again, those rocks on Grand Isle were still there and unaffected from the storm surge, is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
Okay, just wanted to seize the moment to rock it.
Understood, thank you.
And I may say on Grand Isle, we CPRA went ahead and we hired an engineering firm and did the placements and did a lot of the engineering, turn it into the core. Of course, there's always hurdles to jump over with the core, but tentatively, they should be under construction in July of next year. They were probably looking at 4 years because they had a study going on, a resiliency study, which would have taken 3 years. So with Glenn and myself and other members of CPRA working on it along with the engineering firm, and we were able to, like I said, it's tentatively set for July, but like I said, there's still hurdles that you got to be careful with the core, as we all know. So, but that, they do have around $50 million. They will be doing the construction because it was given to them by Congress, and so that looks like it's going to become a reality. Mr. Hidalgo.
Mr. Chairman, I just want to make an additional comment to the board, and that the chairman and executive director were always available to us, okay? Every time we called them, they answered the phone, or if they were in a meeting, they called us back immediately after. So it's a working group, and CPRA, to me, was right there all during this hurricane for us. And I thank you, and I think the board who was not affected needs to know that. Thank you, sir.
And I'd like to personally thank along in an area that Mr. Hidalgo's talking about, all the levy boards and the parish governments. What a great job everyone did. I see Miss Angela Hidalgo's here. This is her first year as director of the levy board, but she's been there for 15, 20 years, and she did a wonderful job in Terrebonne, which took the direct hit, her and Tony Alford and the rest of their board. So my hat's off to all the levy boards, and one day we'll have a meeting where there's no houses flooded. With Terrebonne had 0, so we were happy with a 0 count, and we were able to, me and Glenn met yesterday for about over 2 hours with Major General Peoples and Colonel Jones on all the parishes, and Major Peoples is really on top of it. She is, it looks like she's going to do her best to get as much money as she can from Washington with us. It's a very successful meeting over at the Corps of Engineers in New Orleans, and I think we all headed in the right direction. I thank each and every one of you for a great job, well done. And when somebody like Terrebonne, who flooded 11,000 homes in 2005 for Rita, and then 3,500 homes for Ike, and then Barry was 11 homes because we wasn't finished in 19, and this hurricane 0, it's a testament to a lot of hardworking people that we've come this far. We did tell FEMA they need to recognize that for all the parishes, the money that's being saved by these levee systems. So with that, Mr. Leday.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. With that, we'll shift gears a bit and talk about our implementation update for today. As you can see, as we jump into this, CPRA currently has 108 active projects. As we talk about every time, we've got a handful of those that are in planning as we continue to plan for our next generation of projects, but we've got 58 in engineering and design and 44 in construction, with the overwhelming majority of dollars going to construction. As every month, we want to give you an update on the construction efforts that are either kicking off or we're advertising or opening bids for. We've got, and then completing, we've got 4 of those today. As you see there, part of our Chaffalay Basin program, we have the Bayou Pigeon boat launch that's headed to construction. Our bid opening on that project is next Tuesday, September 24th. It's estimated to cost slightly under $3 million. That is some significant boat launch improvements and expansion for one of the most widely used boat launches in the basin, particularly with the crawfishing industry there. And so excited to partner with the Iberville Parish on that project and get that underway. In addition to that, working on a large-scale ridge and marsh creation project. That is the Grand Bayou Ridge and Marsh Restoration. Construction was just initiated. The successful low bidder on that was Weeks Marine. The estimated base bid was around $45 million, but we did award the additive alt as well, just under $56 million the total project. But that is a ridge and large-scale marsh creation project. It's slightly under 400 acres in size, and it pairs well with some other projects in that vicinity in the Lake Hermitage area. And so excited to see that kicking off. That, of course, all these projects provide that habitat restoration, but this also provides resiliency and additional storm surge for the NOV levee system in Plaquemines Parish. So you'll see a lot of us, a lot of these projects with those multiple lines of descent, the lines of defense benefits. So just keep that in mind as we announce these. In addition to that, in Parish, President Jules' area of St. Charles Parish, we have the Crawford Canal and Sunset Pump Station. The notice to proceed was just issued to Sea Level. His staff is leading that project with some support and funding from CPRA. That project's estimated over $6 million, and that is for the trash screen and trash rack system for that pump station. And so always, we have to keep those operating well. And so excited to see that kick off. And then we have others that we're working on there. That's part of Upper Barataria that will have announcements coming soon, such as Cousins Pump Station. With that, we have, construction projects that are being completed, one of which is another project in the Atchafalaya Basin, the Point Capee Atchafalaya Basin project. That was a project that was done with state surplus dollars that was led by Point Capee Parish. That's a hydrologic restoration project. You can see some of the culverts that were installed for that project, but we were able to just complete that, so successfully complete that project, so happy to announce that to the board. And that was done by a local contractor, Morrow Construction. So just excited to see all these projects get on the ground, and happy to announce that to the board. In addition to that, of course, we've actively got 58 projects in engineering and design. One of those we're in the process of completing. That's the Riggio Marsh Creation Project. That is a QIPR project that was just awarded Phase 2 construction funding. As you can see, we're finalizing the design and the land rights for that project. That project is a significant project. It's a partnership with EPA, one of our federal partners on the QIPR program over there in Delacroix in St. Bernard Parish in Mr. Lane's area. It's approximately 519 acres in size and just over $33 million. So a really significant marsh creation project to provide restoration and resiliency to St. Bernard Parish. So with that, we'll always continue to update the board on a lot of these construction engineering activities. With that, our feature project for today on the implementation update is in Tangipahoa Parish. Wanted to update the board on a lot of activities in Tangipahoa this month. We were able to meet with the parish president a couple of weeks ago. Mr. Crossy at the governor's office and Mr. Lazina and myself were able to talk to the parish president not only about this project, but about ongoing activities with the federal study that you hear me talk a lot about that Tangipahoa is undergoing for flood risk reduction in their parish. So we had a really good meeting with he and his staff and talk about the ongoing activities. But one of those is the Manchac Land Bridge Shoreline Protection Project. And so you can see there that is on the shoreline of Lake Pontchartrain in Tangipahoa. You can see that location. And so much like you'll hear me talk a lot about, this is really kind of building on other successful projects. We talk about LaBranch and some of those activities where we're building on marsh creation and shoreline efforts. This is just another example. This is a successful parish matching project with Restore dollars that we're able to partner with Tangipahoa Parish on and really expand a very successful shoreline protection project that existed that was built by CIAP dollars. That's the Phase 1 breakwater system that you see there, and we were able to expand that into Phase 2. And so you see that there on the right-hand side with just over $13.5 million of Restore. We were able to partner with the parish and build over 12,000 linear feet of shoreline protection efforts with segmented breakwaters to really reduce erosion there on the Lake Pontchartrain shoreline in the parish. And so it's a really successful project. In fact, Phase 1 received the Shoreline Award from the American Shore and Beach Preservation Association in 2023 because it not only prevented shoreline erosion, but it also began trapping sediment that came out of past Manchac. And so we're able to build on that and do that through this this restore matching project. And so we are close to finishing that construction. You can see that ongoing work there. Happy to showcase these videos that are pulled together by our outreach and engagement staff and the work that that's being done by Rigid Construction. And so we have a really good local contractor doing this work, and you can see there how successful it's going to be, and just the wetlands and the environmental system that's going to be protected by this project. So I know Brandon Champon with our office is going to talk about the upcoming round of parish matching projects, but you can just see how successful this one has been, and so happy to showcase that to the board today. As always, it takes a team effort, as we've heard from the board, along with our partners on the private side. You can see all of the engineering and environmental consultants that worked on this, as well as the contractor. You have Fence to Maker, HDR, ELOS, geoengineers, and Rigid Contractors that's building this project. So really thankful that we have great partners on the private and public side. As we finish, just some additional CPRA updates that we wanted to give the board today. We've got really a full month, as always. You can see there we've got a number of meetings for the Amite River Basin as they start to prepare their master plan. They have their regular board meeting as well as public meetings for their master plan. We have we had our CPRA meeting on September 5th, and we've got some other meetings we'll highlight today. We've got on Friday the Natural Resources Steering Commission meeting that is being hosted by DENR and Chairman Dove, and so we'll be there on Friday, September 20th for that at 9 a.m. in LaSalle. We have the kickoff efforts for our Chaffalaya Master Plan. We've got another meeting on Tuesday, October 1st, and so excited to really kick off that important master plan effort, the state's first master plan for the Chaffalaya Basin. And then I know we've talked a little bit about this at the board meeting, but we have the very important Lower Mississippi River Comprehensive Management Study with the Corps of Engineers. CPRA is the state's designee on this effort. This is that mega study, the $25 million 5-year project study that we're doing with the Corps. We have our quarterly public update on Thursday, October 3rd. And that is a virtual meeting that will be held in the next several weeks. With that, some awards we wanted to showcase to the board. Happy to report that we received a communication award for the CPRA Coastal Master Plan. That came from the American Society of Landscape Architects, and that was with the support of Scape Studio that provided all of the communications abilities as well as the mapping work that went into the CPRA Master Plan. And so really great to receive these types of awards, and obviously our team's working hard on the next master plan, and hope to receive these types of awards as we build the 2029 version. In addition to that, we had two successful grant awards for CPRA, as well as the state of Louisiana through Congressman Carter and the work that he did. These were both NIFWIF awards. One is for Irish Bayou Living Shoreline and Shoreline Protection. The other is for Central Wetlands, and so I was able to go down and receive that award with the support of Congressman Carter. We are kicking those projects off. We've got Irish Bayou is already underway in engineering and design, and then Central Wetlands is kicking off right now at the public outreach phase and planning phase. But these are both critical projects. Central Wetlands is actually a large-scale restoration project. We've got partners such as CRCL that are doing pieces of that and plantings, and then we're working with the Corps to really restore that area in and around Mr. Go. And so you'll see a lot of updates on that Central Wetlands effort, but this is our first grant opportunity for that work. Then a couple of final updates. Our First Free Sundays are back, and so that is the ability for us to showcase our partnership with LSU at the Center for River Studies and that phenomenal facility. We were doing some repairs at the facility over the last several months, and so we're able to kick that off again. That starts Sunday, October 6th, and so every Sunday from 1 to 4, the beginning of the month, we have that ability for anyone from the public to come and see that facility. So finally, I'm happy to answer any questions. As always, connect with us on social media and our website. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Lede, for a very informative presentation. Ms. Cormier.
Mr. Lede, can you tell me what the 4 projects that are in the planning stage are?
Certainly, I know a couple of them. We have the St. Tammany Flood Risk Reduction Study. We have the Tangipahoa Flood Risk Reduction Study, both with partnerships with the Corps. We just kicked off the White Lake Restoration effort. That's 3 of them. And Mr. Lazina's here, and he and I can get you the others that are underway.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Cormier. Mr. Corville.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Lede, could you maybe just touch on real quickly, and maybe it's more appropriate at a subsequent meeting, just a quick update on the $30 million that we talked about a couple of meetings ago for rocks along Rockefeller Shoreline? Do you have an update?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Correa. We have a good update for you. So we've been working with the Corps, and they have been working to get those funds released. We're happy to say that we've got those in place. That's the $30 million of capability expressed from the Corps for that project. And so what we've been able to do is partner with the Corps. We're doing work-in-kind credit on that design because we've done all of that work with Cameron Parish and CPRA on the previous work. And so we have kicked that design off for the next 2 to 3 miles of the Rockefeller shoreline protection. CPRA is going to lead the design. That'll be provided to the Corps of Engineers, and then they will lead the construction effort with that $30 million.
Fantastic.
So,
Maybe at a subsequent meeting,
Yep.
Mr. Chairman, if we could get that as an agenda item and maybe get down in the weeds on
Yes.
it, that would be fantastic.
That's perfect. You read my mind. So next month we'll be in Southwest Louisiana, and we have a full update from both CPRA and the Corps on that project.
Fantastic. And the last thing, if I can take another bite at the apple, someone shared with me, it looked like we might have some areas of the Mermentau Basin that have been compromised. I don't know if that's you guys, the Corps, or whoever, but if I'll share some information with you that was sent to me. If we could maybe look into that and see what's going on, and if, who can take care of that and deal with it, I'd really appreciate it.
Yep, happy to look into it and get back to you.
Thank you. I'll send that stuff to you here shortly.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, the board is clear. No more questions. Thank you very much, Ms.
Thank you. Appreciate
Executive Director Lede. Next, we have the Jean Lafitte National Park Living Shoreline and Canal Backfilling Julie Whitbeck National Park Service. Ms. Whitbeck.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks, everybody. It's nice to be here presenting to the CPRA board. My purpose here today is to talk about give updates on 2 major restoration projects that the National Park Service with the park are undertaking at the park's Barrett Area Preserve Unit, which is in Jefferson Parish. The 2 projects are canal backfilling for hydrologic restoration and submerged aquatic vegetation and shoreline protection. Okay, just to remind everybody where the park is, we're moving to Jefferson Parish. It's in the middle of the Barrett Area Basin. It's one of 6 units of the Jean Lafitte National Historical Park and Preserve, which are spread across southern Louisiana. And the Barrett Area Preserve, along with most of Jean Lafitte Park, was established in 1978. Like most areas of our working coast, the coast has been utilized by humans since there was land present there. And more recently, in the past a couple hundred years, it's been very extractive resource use. So the landscape is not at all pristine. This is not like a national wilderness area, as you all know. And the park is engaged in, the park and the Park Service are engaged in a lot of restoration to restore integrity to the landscape and provide some of what we think of as ecosystem services to our neighbors and the human communities surrounding the preserve. I'm going to start with the canal backfilling for hydrologic restoration project. The purpose is to reduce the influence of the Gulf of Mexico and to restore flow between canal waterway channels and their adjacent wetlands, be the wetlands marsh or swamp. Also to reduce the invasive species habitat that the spoil banks along these canals provided, and to increase the resilience of the preserve to increasing influence from the Gulf, including strong tropical storms like Francine. The funding is from the Restore Act administered by the Restore Council. It was $8.7 million. This was a shovel-ready project, so the compliance had already been completed before the award. The award funded the design of backfilling, so understanding the volume of the canal spoil banks, the volume of the channels into which we intended to drag that spoil bank material, and then deciding, prioritizing, projecting costs and prioritizing which canals offered us the most most positive restoration outcome with the funds that we had in hand. The backfilling design was completed in 2021, and construction kicked off in December of '22 and was completed by the middle of May of 2023. Construction backfilled 12 and 3/4 miles of canals, and we have another 1 3/4 mile of canal planned to be backfilled in 2025 and 2026 to utilize the remaining funds in the project. This project also funded environmental and ecological monitoring of the outcomes of this project. So we took baseline environmental and ecological observations and then immediate post-construction observations, and the last intensive monitoring campaign is scheduled for just a couple weeks from now. We report on this project through the Restore Council's Piper interface and their Merlin database, and also through the National Park Service's data store. On the right are a couple of images of the backfilling from this most recent project, backfilling in action on the Davis-Marrero Canal in the preserve. We knocked down the trees first and then drag the spoil bank material from the edges of the canal into the canal channel on top of the knocked down woody material. On the lower image shows a canal that's recently been backfilled a little bit farther north in the preserve. All right, so I've described what backfilling is, and this technical diagram on the upper left illustrates that. The upper diagram is the spoil banks in place, and the lower diagram shows with the same coloration, so the brown of the spoil banks is moved into the channel, and the effect is to diminish the breadth and the depth of the channel. So if you remember from your classroom physics, the flow through a pipe is scaled to, let's see, you know that a scientist is going to flub up on something like that right away. The flow through a channel is a cubic or quadratic multiplier of the dimensions of the diameter of the channel. So we're trying to reduce the diameter of these channels in addition to restoring the water flow between the channels and the adjacent wetland. This most recent project, this Restore Act funded project, is the third iteration of canal backfilling at the preserve. So the park and the Park Service already were aware of the beneficial outcomes for the landscape and the integrity restoration of the landscape from a pilot project in 2001 and 2002 on two short canal segments. They're the lightest blue in the map on the right, two keyhole canals off of the Bayou Seignet waterway. The picture on the lowest left shows that the canal before backfilling, and on the next one over shows the canal post backfilling. The map on the right illustrates these three phases of backfilling. The lightest blue keyhole canals off of Bayou Seignet were 2001, 2002. The other blue illustrates canals backfilled with America Recovery and Restoration Act money in 2010. And then the red marked canals are the canals that were permitted for backfilling in this most recent iteration. 16.5 miles of canals were permitted in this last iteration. We backfilled 12 and 3/4 miles. Some of that is because we experienced substantial shoreline erosion in the period between the permitting and the actual backfilling, so it no longer made sense to backfill some of the keyholes that were right on the edges of Lake Catawatchee and Lake Salvador. All right, simultaneously, we monitored, and I say we here, we worked with CDM Smith, a contractor, to monitor the baseline conditions the immediate post-construction conditions, and then shortly the 2 years post-construction conditions at both backfilled and then parallel unbackfilled canal and adjacent wetland sites. We split these sites between the types of marsh that are the types of wetland that are most predominant in the preserve. Most of the area now is marsh, so we have 8 marsh sites and 4 swamp sites. We monitor both environmental metrics, so most importantly, perhaps, the actual dimensions of the canal channel before and after, any accretion or subsidence that's occurring in the adjacent wetland, water level, and then also water quality parameters like salinity, including soil pore water salinity. We also look at ecological metrics, so how effectively are the biological communities and ecosystems in these wetlands and also in the canal channel being restored by this kind of project. We look at vegetative community, and also in the channel, the waterway channel, we look at the nekton, the smallest modal organisms in the water channel. And we also look at measures of productivity, so carbon sequestration, which I saw is coming up on your agenda later today. We look at these, we monitor at 3 different locations in each of these sites. So in the channel, on the spoil bank or former spoil bank, and in the adjacent wetland. So we've completed, the design was completed in 2021. 12 3/4 miles of construction were completed in 2023, and we plan to utilize the remaining $2 million by backfilling another 1 3/4 miles of canal in 2025, 2026. The environmental and ecological monitoring outcomes is funded through just this coming winter, and we expect to receive the final report from our contractor by next September. And the map on the right just illustrates the next step canal segments, parallel canal, and a part of Upper Kenta Canal that we plan to try to backfill with those remaining funds. Okay, now I'm going to switch gears, or I could pause for questions, so just a quick little survey. I'm going to switch gears then to talk about the Submerged Aquatic Vegetation and Shoreline Protection Project. The purpose of this project is to restore a net 50 acres of submerged aquatic vegetation, SAV for short, and additionally protect the Barataria Preserve's Lake Salvador shoreline, the most vulnerable part of it, from erosion. The funding here is from the Natural Resource Damage Assessment for the Deepwater Horizon disaster, and it is administered through the Louisiana Trustee Implementation Group. The entire project funding is $24 million. This project required the full planning, construction, and monitoring components from compliance and new surveys and consultation through the design of the shoreline protection feature itself and a series of decisions about what that feature should be, and also the development of the project's monitoring and adaptive management plan, later on the construction and the implementation of that MAM plan. The timeline extends, or the current timeline, is 2019 through 2025, and then the monitoring and adaptive management phase is intended to extend through 2024. Like all of these NARDAR DWH projects, we report through NOAA's Diver program. The map on the right illustrates the extent of the breakwater structure that we decided to employ to provide the shoreline protection. You'll notice that it's a little bit off of the shoreline of the preserve, and that's intentional to protect some very shallow water habitat. That is the habitat where we expect the submerged aquatic vegetation to recruit. So we've used some understanding of the biology and ecology of submerged aquatic vegetation plants, and we're protecting a zone where that community of very important plants can reestablish adjacent to the shoreline. In other extents of the preserved shoreline on Lake Catawachi, north of the Lake Salvador area especially, submerged aquatic vegetation is robust, and it offers an awful lot of services both to fisheries as a nursery for important fishery species and as physical protection for that very soft flotant marsh shoreline in the preserve. You see an image of some of the lush submerged aquatic vegetation beds in the Lake Catawachi zone adjacent to the park. All right, little timeline or schedule here of the steps the Park Service has taken. Everything in black and with a check mark is completed. The blue is underway or about to be completed. The images here are of the construction, which the contract was awarded last year, but the construction began in January of this year. The breakwater structure is built, and the contractor is returning this week. They have backfilled 10% approximately of their flotation channel, and they'll return to backfill the rest of the flotation channel, and that will wrap up the entire construction phase. Then we'll move on to some post-construction monitoring per the MAM plan in October and November this year. And the MAM plan stipulates a monitoring twice a year in summer peak SAV growing season, June, July, and at peak SAV biomass at the end of the growing season, circa October. So the intention is to continue that monitoring. The green dots now superimposed on the map on the right illustrate the location of that monitoring across the project area. So at different sort of fetches across Lake Salvador. And then we can see that we're monitoring both physical attributes. There's a water level and quality well established right off the shoreline there, as well as biological attributes like the submerged aquatic vegetation and floating aquatic vegetation, which has an impact on the habitat for the submerged aquatic vegetation. The image on the extreme lower left there is something unexpected that happened as we went to our first baseline monitoring event not last October, but in October of 2021. Hurricane Ida came through at the very end of August in 2021, tore up huge amounts of floatant marsh to the south in the Barataria Basin, and a substantial amount of that floatant ended up lodged against the Lake Salvador shoreline of the Barataria Preserve. So it's still, some of it is still there, and you can see this very nicely in the remotely sensed imagery, but it definitely is having an impact on the extent of that SAV habitat that this project will create. So we are sort of keeping our fingers on the pulse of that, the dynamics of that loosely established, redispersed floatant material. We'll be out there again tomorrow, actually, and we have some initial recon that suggests that some of that Ida-deposited floatant marsh was shifted by Francine, but held within the breakwater structure. So live and learn. We'll feed back to you all soon. Next steps, this is just an image of the end of the day progress from the construction as of mid-October. Construction's almost complete. We'll continue implementing the MAM plan and continue reporting through NOAA Diver and through the NPS data store. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions, members? Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Just thinking about your on your SAV protection. Did you do any transplanting of SAVs, or are you just strictly counting on recruitment?
We're strictly counting on recruitment, and we base that approach on modeling undertaken by LSU and the USGS that suggested that the physical conditions, if we diminished the physical energy incident upon this part of the Lake Salvador shoreline, that was the only habitat attribute that was missing from enabling the restoration and the regrowth of the submerged aquatic vegetation that had been present in that location prior to 2010.
Because this is right at the intersection of protection and restoration, right? Because you saw in the presentation that Glenn did earlier, all of the storm surge heights that was stopped by the Marganda to the Gulf system.
Yeah.
What we're seeing in the Marganda to the Gulf system, the area in the basin protected by it, is it's starting to sweeten up. The water's getting fresher. And so it's been damaged for so long, we do not have the submerged aquatic vegetation that we would like to have in there for all of the benefits that it provides and lets additional marsh start to recruit also. So I was just curious if there was any planning, because I think this is another area that we're going to as we start to be able to have the Morganza to the Gulf system online and be able to actually actively manage it, not just from a for protection point of view, but to sweeten up the estuary behind it, this is going to be an area that we need a lot of help with in getting and building back the SAV that used to be there historically.
Right. SAV is so important. We really hope that both of these projects will help inform restoration at the state's at the full extent for the state's coast. We're aware that canal backfilling is not widely used by the state as a restoration approach, but we hope to be able to illustrate the benefits of canal backfilling on our federal lands. And then, we'll see just how long it takes for submerged aquatic vegetation to reestablish and to grow lushly in this area. So it'll be a learning experience for us all.
Okay, with that, I thank you. Yes, okay, Mr. Davidson.
You said that y'all chose the canals based on most benefit. Was there an alternative that was proposed to do a little bit more backfilling? And if so, what prevented you from doing that?
There are more canals at the Barataria Preserve. So the Park Service just acquired about 3,000 acres of land to the south of the main area of the preserve. This is land immediately north and east of the town of Lafitte and north of the Penn. There's plenty of old oil and gas exploration era canals there that the park would be interested in backfilling. Backfilling costs a lot of money. It's way above the kind of budget that the park has. We have to wait for large pools of money to become available. The park and the Park Service find this approach to be beneficial to our landscape, and we're interested in moving forward with more backfilling should funds become available. I'm not sure I quite answered
that
your
definitely
question.
answered it. So in terms of funding become available, has there been any conversation about using some of those national park restoration dollars that were approved through the Great American Outdoors Act?
Yeah, we tried to. We flew that flag up the flagpole for some of the IRA and the BIL pools, but it was not successful at the regional scale. The region has to consider all the different parks in the region and divide opportunities among them. And we were considered to be a park that has received a lot of funding lately. So, we compete for funding at the national scale and even at the regional sector of the national scale. Yeah.
Okay, well, if there's anything, I think I could speak for the board here, but if there's anything that we can do to help with that push moving forward, we definitely want to be as helpful as possible. So just let us know.
Very glad to hear that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Davidson. And with that, the board is clear. And Ms. Whitbeck, thank you very much. Very informative. With that, we have CPRA funding updates, Coastal Carmen, Brian Lazina, CPRA, and Bo Jones, Twig.
Morning, Chairman, members. We appreciate the opportunity to be with you today on behalf of myself and Mr. Jones, and we'll get into what we come with today is a little bit different than you normally see. We do a lot of implementation updates. We do a lot of what we're putting on the ground, what we're about to put on the ground. But for this update, we wanted to go a little bit a different direction and show you some of the background on what's going on behind the scenes sometimes at CPRA and with our partners here. So, as you know, we're always looking to innovate. Behind the scenes, you always have things going on that we're looking at, updates to science and policy, how we implement or plan for projects, and currently, how we're going to fund these projects into the future, which is obviously a big topic right now. So what you're going to hear from us today is actually all three of those things wrapped into one, which we're investigating here into what we're calling coastal carbon investigations. Next slide. Thanks, Bo. So a little bit, just some backstory on what we're talking about, and then Bo will take us home on a few items here. Basically, we're talking about generating on the market carbon credits. And so what's a carbon credit? And you may have heard this Recently, there's been another big push. So basically, it's the idea of, and this was mentioned, sequestration. How do we get that carbon from the atmosphere? We get that into natural systems like this, and then how do we generate credit? So normally you'd have, I'll give you an example, maybe an area was mined, strip mining. Somebody can come in with investment, reforest, replant that area, go through mitigation and monitoring on all those things, and a third party can then come in and assess credits. Essentially, how many tons of carbon have you taken out of the atmosphere, out of the system, and stored in this particular area? And that credit then can then be sold to another party that's looking to offset or buy down, so to speak, some of the emissions they may have or others. I will say one of the important things here is this is currently, except in a few states in America, a voluntary market. And so you'll hear some of that. That comes with both challenges and opportunities. Challenges is it's voluntary. Opportunities, though, it gives us a wider range of maybe how to utilize that for the state's coastal program. Next. So another topic, as we narrow this down a little bit, that you've probably heard a little bit about lately is blue carbon. So historically, this carbon crediting has been reforestation, has been protection of grasslands, that sort of thing that's really, really finite. You can see that. It's easier to do and credit. But there's a recognition around the globe now about blue carbon. We can better maybe sequester some of this carbon in what you see in mangroves, salt marshes, seagrasses, and at the same time, restore some of these critical habitats that are imperiled around the world and certainly within coastal Louisiana. And you can see some of the numbers. We won't go in detail, but obviously the effectiveness of these systems in capturing carbon is greater than a lot of those that are currently in play. Next, Bo. So, but we're taking it a step further here. We have those systems in Louisiana, but they may be restricted in area, and we're looking at something maybe more called coastal carbon. So seagrasses, mangroves, salt marshes are all great. And unfortunately, I think between different versions, the numbers have gotten a little bit wiped off the screen here. But when you look at coastal Louisiana, and if you can see, swamp it's over 40% of the area here and goes down from there. And you see salt marsh is last, and seagrasses are pretty much behind the Chandelier Islands, and that's it. But what we do have is a lot of swamp, fresh marsh, intermediate marshes, and thankfully Ms. Whitbeck was just in front of us in submerged aquatics, those low salinity grasses that do a great job of doing that. So what we're trying to do here is look at opportunities for these other systems as well, unique to Louisiana. I will say that's not a lot been on that. Bo will touch it on that a bit, but that's a big part we're trying to make here. So why the need? Why is CPRA considering kind of going down this pathway? And I will say this whole thing is a consideration of should we go down this pathway. We want to be prudent with how the state and its partners goes. Obviously, the need is great. We all know the need. The board appreciates the need. It's our coastal crisis, as we say. And so we have to move the needle on that. And, of course, that costs dollars. The other part of that is, and if you look, you can't see, but some of the methods that we use are exactly the methods that you would use to stand up these carbon projects. It's marsh creation, swamp restoration, all of those things, protection of submerged aquatics that we do. So we are in a good place to be able to do that here in coastal Louisiana, just with some challenges, of course, on there. And obviously the big push is how do we make this a part of the coastal program so that we can either fund projects or expand the coastal program to become a little more self-sufficient on there. Next. So what we did was myself and Bo asked the team of smarter individuals than us to get together and really look at some items on here. And so first thing is, I mentioned we're different than some of these other systems that you would find in the Philippines or other places. Can we use current sort of practices in coastal Louisiana? Can we just pick something off the shelf and be able to do that? We needed to know, is this something we can just pick up? Or if not, as you see the second part, would we have to go in and make some amendments, look at different opportunities to be able to generate those credits in a meaningful way in a voluntary market currently in coastal Louisiana and some of those things? And then really third, we never want to reinvent the wheel here. A lot of this work goes on. It's in universities. It may be be siloed in a few pieces. And obviously, we've all learned that if we can get folks together and chatting on here, they're pretty forthcoming, and we can leverage carbon science and policy that's already been done, and just as importantly, science and policy that's being done in the private sector as well, as Mr. Jones will touch on. So a little bit on the bottom there, obviously incredibly diverse habitats, which again, opportunities and challenges, and I'll turn it over to Bo to go through a little bit of the particulars on there.
Yeah, thanks so much, Brian, and thanks, Chairman Dove, and to the members of the board for allowing me to come and be here. As Brian said, I'm flanked by a large group of individuals who are way smarter than me. We've got Dr. Tim Carruthers, Aaron Cascadden, and Garvin Pittman, who are some of our leads from this project. And also, one of the things I want to point out, this, as Brian mentioned, this is an all hands on deck, right? Financing the future of the coastal program and incentivizing investment into coastal habitats across the Gulf is an all hands on deck. It's the private sector, it's the public sector, it's universities, NGOs on down the line. So touching a little bit on the demand and the big picture, as Brian said, we hear a lot about carbon credits. We hear a lot about carbon sequestration. What we are talking about is nature-based, so not downhole, right? So nature-based carbon sequestration, but also protection of carbon stocks that are existing. What we know about voluntary carbon markets internationally is that it's north of a $2 billion annual market through voluntary carbon markets. The majority of that in the nature-based side is through planting trees. You know, if you take a flight, you can, set aside a couple dollars to plant a tree or to protect a tree. But as Brian pointed out, in some estimates, coastal habitats like, mangrove habitats around Port Fourchon or in Florida or coastal habitats in Louisiana can have upwards of an 80x multiplier on the carbon sequestration benefit of a terrestrial forest. So a $2+ billion annual market is based upon terrestrial forests primarily, and what this board and the team at CPRA and the levee districts and the locals around the state of Louisiana are protecting and conserving and building is potentially an 80x multiplier on what this entire market is based off of. So the police call that a clue, right? And that's what we're trying to do is move through this. You can see some of the reports here and the work that's being done internationally around blue and coastal carbon. So why don't we have carbon credits? Why is the coastal program not funded by Apple and Microsoft, who want to offset their emissions? Well, as a typical lawyer like myself would say, well, it's complicated and it depends on the reason. So what we have here is, this is a study that we did in 2016 with Port Fourchon through our partnership of our Working Coast, with Restore America's Estuaries, with Terra Carbon. And to put it in very simple, non-scientific terms, at the current prices in 2016 and even today, and with the amount of monitoring and maintenance and with the assumptions that the existing standards make, the juice isn't worth the squeeze, right? The amount of benefit that you would get in a carbon credit, it barely makes up the additional monitoring you need to do for certification. So there's two drivers there. One, what is the price of that credit? And two, what are the assumptions that are being made under these standards? We know that there are areas in Louisiana where there's carbon that has been stored for 4,000 years. Yet the assumptions that are built in Vera and the Verified Carbon Standard are conservative assumptions for good reason. And they say that anytime a marsh is inundated, upwards of 100% of that carbon goes back into the atmosphere. That may not be the case. And so looking scientifically and from a policy standpoint as to what is actually happening is what we're trying to do here. So what are some of the big issues? Two of the critical, and I promise, Brian, I'm not going to get into the weeds. I've got a whole team here, and I'm happy to talk for hours and hours. Grab a cup of coffee, and we can talk about this so you don't fall asleep. But there are two big drivers here, permanence and additionality, right? Permanence is that when you are selling a carbon credit, whether it's downhole, whether it's direct air capture, whether it's for a process, or whether it's for a tree or a piece of marsh, you have to provide some certification that that carbon is going to be stored for a certain amount of time, generally 100 years. I challenge anyone on this board or in Louisiana to find a particular area of marsh in Louisiana and tell me what's going to happen 100 years from now. It is a very dynamic system. That is its beauty. That is a lot of its value is the dynamism, but it makes it pretty hard to draw a particular polygon here and drill into it. Additionality, right, is that emissions reductions or removals, there's kind of a but-for causation of the carbon crediting. Well, we know this board is already doing a lot of work, so how do we challenge, push against this additionality? But then also, as I pointed out, the independent bodies that set these standards, and they are fantastic, but there are some assumptions that are overly conservative and may not be drilled down with specific data and specific science in Louisiana. So that's what, with CPRA, with USGS, with University of Louisiana, with LSU, with international experts from around the world, that's what we're working on. This is a very complex set of graphs, or graph here, or diagram, but the point is, what we're doing is we're taking this at both ends. We're looking at the law, both internally in Louisiana and internationally, and we're looking at the policy. Say, what are the policy drivers around carbon markets, and how can we open up opportunities for coastal or blue carbon markets? And then we're looking at the science and data assumptions. There are a significant number of questions that exist. How much carbon is stored by Louisiana's coastal program? How long does it stay there? What happens if it moves? There are a lot of questions that we are working very hard to answer. CPRA is very hands-on in this effort, but so are a lot of other people. We are working directly with oil and gas industry, who are very interested in this question as well, with landowners, with locals, and with other NGOs and universities to try and answer some of these questions. Again, as I said, it's all hands on deck. So what's been done to date? As I mentioned, a lot. There's been a lot of science, a lot of policy work. On the top right, there's an article that should come out any day now that we were happy to be a part of. It has some of the top carbon experts in the world, and the focus of this is how can we leave less carbon on the table. This should be coming out in a matter of days. We're also working on a lot of technical work with CPRA and a lot of collaborative work. We stood up with CPRA support the Northern Gulf Coast Blue Carbon Network, because as Brian said, we don't need to reinvent the wheel. There are a lot of people looking at these across the country, and I can say that over the last year of having these conversations, one thing that has been consistent is that Louisiana and the work that has been done by this board stands alone internationally and within the United States as having a great opportunity, not just because there's a lot of marsh. We know that somewhere around 3% of the world's habitat is marsh, and it sequesters 30% of the world's carbon, and that Louisiana has a whole lot of marsh and a whole lot of blue and coastal carbon habitats. But it's because of the work of this board and having a comprehensive plan that you can start to think about carbon markets as more of a mutual fund than a particular stock, right? We can look system-wide, we can look coast-wide. So there are opportunities that exist in Louisiana that simply just don't exist around the country and around the world. Again, a lot of work is underway. Some of that is work in collaboration with CPRA. Some of that is funded by the private sector. Some of that is grant funded. Some of that is already ongoing at universities. This is an all hands on deck, and there's a lot of things on the horizon trying to get the federal government through NOAA, through United States Army Corps of Engineers interested as well. And I want to end by kind of flipping the script a little bit and saying, we talk a lot about credits and carbon credits and this idea that one day we'll have this fungible carbon coin that can fund projects in Louisiana. I would argue that whether there is a coin or a credit at the end of this is important work to consider, because adequately valuing and calculating the value of Louisiana's coastal habitats is critically important. Yes, there may be opportunities for markets. But there's also critical, anybody who's gone through a benefit cost analysis knows that identifying the value of protections of the projects that are being done at the local and state level, but also when we are going to, when there are federal delegations pointing out the real importance to Louisiana, that it's not just about protecting homes in our parishes, it is about, playing a big role on the large scale for the country. Also, incentivizing private investment. If a standard is modified or methodology is modified on this isn't just something that CPRA could take advantage of. Any private landowner, any private entity that has the rights on land, it will open up opportunities to incentivize private investment into coastal Louisiana. And so that's what we're trying to explore. It's an investigation, and we're trying to tie it to all the many other investigations that are going on around the country and locally. So thank you for your time.
And so, obviously, you heard Bo and I go through this incredibly fast. There's a lot of depth and detail in here, along with a lot of offshoot sort of projects on there, looking at methods, materials, techniques. How do we build projects? Is there better ways we can reduce sort of our footprint to make that more beneficial on there? Obviously, a lot of work. I'd like to thank Dr. Jim Paul, who leads the effort for CPRA, Skylar Liner, who's in the audience here for us. But I will say it. This is just the start of this. We'll be back in front of this board. We kind of wanted to put these things out there as for interest and hope to help a little bit, but I can tell you there's a lot more to this in depth if we had the chance, like Bo and I both said we could sit here for hours on there, but happy to take any questions.
Yeah, I have one question. You hear carbon and you hear blue carbon. Is there a difference? If it's their difference, I guess I'm asking.
It's all carbon. It's just how that carbon's sequestered. So whether or not it's they don't really have a green one, but it became blue carbon just because of water, coastal activities, those sort of things. Coastal carbon, same carbon molecule.
Blue carbon once it's sequestrated.
It's just blue carbon by definition of where it is in geography and how it's sequestered.
That's what I mean. Yeah.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman,
that's Dustin hit it just because the water's blue, pretty much. Yeah,
and that's why when we talk about coastal carbon, because blue carbon is generally looking at ocean habitats. That's how it's kind of been framed. To oversimplify it, there's basically two ways that you can generate carbon, any carbon credit, whether it's downhole sequestration, whether it's a process improvement, whether it's planting a forest, planting a marsh, protecting a marsh. All of it is based on there's two steps down. Are you taking carbon out of the atmosphere and storing it, or are you preventing carbon that would have otherwise gone into the atmosphere and preventing that from happening?
Okay.
And so in coastal habitats in Louisiana, you can do both. You can, when we plant and build a new marsh and create new land, that is sequestering carbon out of the atmosphere. But when we protect marsh from being eroded, we are preventing future oxidation of that carbon to go back into the atmosphere. So it's both and. But the blue carbon, the answer is all of it, whether it's downhole sequestration, direct air capture, marsh restoration, tree building, swamps, it all comes down to the same construct of, are you preventing carbon going into the atmosphere, or are you pulling it down?
Okay.
Yep. Just one follow-up. I'd say with that, though, what you're seeing now is also a recognition that carbon, that sequestration in those types of areas, folks look at as a dual benefit, right? Same as we're trying to do with the coastal program. We can put those critical habitats back on the landscape or protect them, as well as generating those credits, that feedback.
Okay, and Mr. Bourgeois.
Yeah, good presentation, guys. What kept running through my head through this is the type of projects we have, again, the cross-section of protection and restoration. And I'll go to Morganza to the Gulf, right? We are already seeing basically wetlands being restored inside of the system just for the fact that those big storm surges were saltwater plugs that slugs of water that we stopped from coming in. The problem we're having here, and the problem that I think we're faced with what you're doing is very similar, is that we've had the Assistant Secretary of the Army, not the current one, but a previous one, say, well, in his mind, the Morganza to the Gulf system, for example, was self-mitigating. So its direct impacts were offset by the amount of marsh that it was creating inside of the system because of its design that remained open and normally let a lot of things in and then stopped that big salt water. So I think as you pursue blue carbon as a type of credit that we could get in response to the protection that we're putting out there, I think we have to also tie it to the creation of marshes and offsetting from a wetland impacts point of view too. So there's a lot of folks across the nation, the guys who are big river guys that are big room for the river, they just don't want levees. They don't like levees. They don't understand our levees actually have these huge environmental benefits baked into the design. And I think that while you're chasing getting credit for blue carbon, we should be chasing getting credit for marsh creation, which is the same marsh or the SAVs that we're going to be creating in some of the freshwater areas that are going to be the thing that's really sucking up that blue carbon. So, or that carbon, it's black because it's carbon, but it's, anyway, that's it.
And Mr. Bourgeois, I think that's an important point. And, I'll note that, one of when I mentioned the benefit cost analysis, right, we had the privilege of working a lot of folks in Louisiana with the Army Corps of Engineers on revisiting the benefit cost analysis and how it factors in environmental and societal benefits into that benefit cost score. And so there's an ongoing effort from the Engineering with Nature program at United States Army Corps of Engineers that we are not blind to the fact that acknowledging the comprehensive benefits of what is being done, that's the opportunity. And one of the things that we're explicitly looking at is, as I mentioned, the carbon markets are very much a static polygon by polygon framework. But we recognize that we have a systems approach here. We have multiple habitats that are dynamic, that change, and may be salt one day, may be fresh today. So we're trying to fit that round peg into the square holes, and it gets precisely what you're talking about.
Well, right, because, I mean, you could actually generate funding from the creation of blue carbon sequestration, but what we're having to do is pay for the mitigation of the impacts that we shouldn't have to be paying for, so we can do more with less if we can get that offset.
That is understood, acknowledged, that we always try to check that self-mitigating box first and go from there. Yep.
Mr. Colville.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've put my toe in these waters to test them for a while now, and there were always a couple of things that I stumbled on. It looks like you guys might be trying to address. One was kind of the prevented loss and being able to quantify that. So help me understand, because this is where I get lost in the weeds, the way these companies are valuing the carbon. Is it in the stem, then the roots, and then different depths in the soil? Is that a fair judgment? And then at some point, there's a rate and a value for each of those sort of
over time, right?
Profiles, if you will, over time. But the only way you can get credit is for permanent storage, or is there some, will you see this market evolve into some timeline where, at some point, theoretically, as the coast erodes, you're going to have this release of carbon, and that's part of it's inevitable, part of it's not. At some point, that's probably going to be the tougher thing to convince folks in the sort of financial world that this is what reality looks like, and if we can slow that sort of transformation from one state, being emergent marsh in a certain type, to open water, is that the heavy lift in here? I mean, we know we can restore marshes, and we know these marshes and the soils and the roots all have some sequestering capacity, but now you've got to convince the markets, and I guess whoever's really passionate and emotional about carbon sequestering, that there's a value to that. Am I on the right track here?
You're absolutely on the right track, and I would, on the first point on permanence, right? If you look across all, voluntary carbon markets, permanence is a scale. Permanence is a continuum, right? There are high permanence projects and there are lower permanence projects. It's not a threshold. There's an initial threshold to get over to, but that factors into the valuation of it, right? So that's precisely what we're looking at, and there's actually some literature out there that, we talk about the time value of money, right? That start to explore the time value of carbon. Is carbon sequestered today more valuable than the carbon 100 years from now, right? And that's exactly, that's precisely some of the questions that we are wrestling with, and the international community is wrestling with. So you're spot on.
Yeah, and from whatever, obviously I have landowner interests, and share a lot of colleagues that have the same thing, and we keep going to a point, and then we hit this doesn't seem reasonable or real, and we move on to something else. I think that we're all interested in it, and for whatever capacity we may have and expertise, experience, whatever, I think that we're all in, and I'll certainly volunteer myself and look forward to working with you guys, because it's an interesting concept, but you always get to this one point that it's just like, good gracious, I've got other things to do here.
And that's what we're trying to identify, because, like Bo said, there are differences in permanence, but that comes with different values and credits. And some of these projects are very expensive projects. And so do we do things differently? But all of those variables are moving at the same time. So we're really trying to identify which ones we should or should not push hard on and invest to keep this thing moving.
And one thing, and I credit you guys and your vision and CPRA's vision and Mr. Leday and your whole team, is there's a lot of money moving around this carbon world. And at some point, if we can convince them this is a good investment and it's good good for the environment, which we all know it is, it could become a reality. But yeah, anything that I can do, and a lot of my colleagues, I think we're all in, because somebody's going to do something, and there's a lot of interest, and I think there's some people willing to pay for it. And so if we can exercise this opportunity, why not?
Thank you. Okay, and Mr. Carl?
Yes. Have we tried to approach Apple, Microsoft, or what have you for their carbon credits, and how would we convince them to, let's say, invest in this area versus other places around the country?
So, yeah, we haven't directly, because this voluntary market, Congressman, has become very sort of, it has changed over the years, so that folks really want to look at a quality, a known, a verified sort of investment that they're making in that. And so that's exactly where we're trying to get, is to give that sense of confidence, to give that sense of quality to those firms. They do obviously do that, but they are, to date, taking those things that are, better vetted, all of those things. Some of the answers are a little better known on there. Now, we firmly intend to engage all of them. They can still donate, right? They can still build marsh. But from a carbon credit standpoint, these are some of the challenges that we're exactly trying to address here.
Mr. Gal, we have talked to numerous credit purchasers, large-scale credit purchasers, typically in the kind of local industries, and one of the biggest fears of, and just to be very clear, one of the biggest challenges of the carbon offset market and the carbon offset world is a fear that someone is going to purchase a credit that is going to turn out to be a junk credit or greenwashing or something of that sort. So there's a high level, a high bar that particularly some of these institutional investors like your Apples, your Microsofts, your Shell. Shell is one of the largest traders of carbon credits in the world, and there's a high bar that they want to see of the quality of the credit, but also of the verifiability of what is being done. But I could say that Apple bought up, the Muscarilla project in Colombia, which is a blue carbon dealing with red mangrove project, which is one of the largest ones in this region. Apple bought up most of those credits of the first vintage. So they are definitely looking in this space. But yes, we have reached out to many of the credit purchasers, and I think that's a great line of questioning to say, okay, if we need science and data and funding to get to the point of verification, when I said it's all hands on deck, there's absolutely a room for public-private partnerships here before that credit is let, so that company, and as I said before, we are the Water Institute and its team, university and NGO partners, we are receiving funding from industry partners who are interested and want to buy credits once there are credits available. So if you have a number at Apple, I'd love to call them. But yes, we're asking those questions.
I think, Glenn, you wanted to speak?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, you got it.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Jones and Mr. Lazina. I know we've talked. The work that we're talking about at the board is obviously critical. One of the things just wanted to highlight, you said at the end there, is not only obviously this is a funding effort that we're looking at alternative sources of funding beyond the Deepwater Horizon spill dollars, but it's not just carbon, like you said. It's benefit cost ratios and those sorts of things. You saw we highlighted at the end of August the award that St. Bernard Parish got in coordination with us at CPRA on the Lake Leary project, utilizing this science to understand the benefits to some of these nature-based solutions is critical, and then we can utilize that for other sources of funding like FEMA, FMA, flood mitigation assistance. And so just wanted to highlight that, Mr. Lane, and the work that went into that, and then this type of science that can go into funding future projects, whether it's FEMA, FMA, or other grant opportunities.
Indeed, and there's a lot of work that's been done by CPRA and our team with partners that whether there's ever a credit quantifying the carbon that has been and could be sequestered into the future.
Okay, we have Mr. Lane next.
Thank you. And
Mr. Chairman, thank you for mentioning that. I've been chomping at the bit here because I was hoping you would mention this because all the little buzzwords that you've been talking about, financing the coastal program, opportunities and such, it fits exactly what just happened 2 weeks ago. And then with the storm last week, I think everything ties in. So I'm glad you mentioned that. But that's exactly what that is. That's another funding opportunity for the entire coastal program. And it's significant. In dollar range, it's a $20 million project. And that seems kind of maybe small compared to a lot of other projects that are going out there when you're talking that large-scale marsh creation. But the significance of that award, that FEMA award, the first of its kind, is huge for the entire state and this coastal master program. So thank you for bringing that to the attention, and thank you for letting me speak. Thanks.
Ms. Davidson, you have a comment?
Yeah, no, I just want to say this is incredibly critical because, as you know, the Department of Energy and Natural Resources recently got primacy from the EPA to do downhole carbon capture, which is extremely great for the state. I think, prior to primacy, there were 31 applications that were sitting at the EPA, 22 of which were in Louisiana. So we're already leading the nation in that space of your more, I would say traditional. It's pretty new, but your more traditional form of carbon capture. But pore space is finite, right? We don't have as much as we would hope in terms of continuing to take on a lot of these carbon resources. So this is extremely critical. But then also we talked a lot about the sequestration components of it, but the economic impact is incredibly important as well. So we're seeing a lot of companies coming to Louisiana wanting to sequester, taking that carbon from places like California or other industrial places that need somewhere to store it. And I think as we start to run out of that pore space, this could be a great opportunity to continue driving that economic value to the state of Louisiana. So as you all continue to look into this, I would love to know more about the economics behind it, the job creation, and the sustainability of it moving forward as we continue to look through primacy as well.
Certainly.
Yeah, indeed.
All right, so the board's clear. Thank you, Mr. Lucina and Mr. Jones. And I guess we'll move on to the next item on the agenda, which is the avian data monitoring portal. Mr. John Weeb and Mr. Maury Charlie from CPRA.
All right, Mr. Bourgeois, members of the board, good morning. Maury Chatelier with the Coastal Protection and Restoration Authority. I have with me Mr. Jonathan Weeb from the Louisiana Department of Wildlife and Fisheries out of the Lafayette office. And we're here going to present avian data monitoring portal, which is some of the exciting and work of this particular project out of our Deepwater Horizon funds. Make no bones about this. This is John's project. This is his presentation, so I'm going to give me 2 minutes to give you a little intro on a funding piece, and that'll be the last you hear from me this morning. Some of you may be aware of this, and if entities, we've been talking about this for a decade now, but if you are, my apologies. We brought up Deepwater Horizon funding. You're aware that there are 3 funding streams that the state utilizes from Deepwater Horizon, one of which the resources and ecosystem sustainability, tourist opportunities, revived economies of the Gulf Coast States Act, which thankfully we can call the Restore Act. Restore Act, the Clean Water Act civil penalties. The second, the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation, which are the criminal penalties administered through the Gulf Environmental Benefit Fund. And then lastly, the Natural Resource Damage Assessment, or which we refer to as NRDA. This is the settlement dollars for funds, to compensate for the affected damages from Deepwater. This is our largest funding stream that came in at $5 billion. And it's on that funding stream that will give you a little more detail. You're aware the NRDA dollars are administered by trustees. Gulf Coast wide, there are 5 states that are members of the trustees, of the trustee council, and our 4 federal agencies, the Department of Commerce, which is represented by NOAA, the Department of Interior, which is U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, EPA, and then the Department of Agriculture, which is NRCS. This is just showing the 7 TIGs, or trustee implementation groups. The trustees look at an area-wide implementation effort. So each of these areas, the 5 individual states, their jurisdictional boundaries are what the trustees oversee. So you have an Alabama TIG, Florida TIG, and obviously a Louisiana TIG. There are 2 additional TIGs that are shown on here, the open ocean and the region-wide. Again, these are area-based. The open ocean trustees look at Gulf-wide resources, wide-ranging migratory bird species, deep benthic organisms. The open ocean trustees are the 4 federal agencies only, no state entities involved. Then lastly, you've got the region-wide TIG. That's okay. The region-wide TIG, looking at marine mammals, sea turtles, birds, and oysters. These entities and resources range throughout the Gulf. So the region-wide TIG does not look at jurisdictional boundaries. The trustees for region-wide encompass the 5 Gulf states as well as the 4 federal agencies. So it's with the region-wide, and we'll look at it here. Your TIGs that are allocated and the funds allocated, you see Louisiana with the largest of $5 billion, but we'll focus on the region-wide. Again, those trustee resources are implemented by 5 states, the 4 federal agencies. The TIGs across the board implement these dollars through restoration planning efforts. The restoration plans are put together, they're publicly vetted before the trustees can actually expend the dollars. Apart from the restoration planning effort, there are the trustees and the trustee council realize the breadth of the damages from the spill. So they're allocated monitoring and adaptive management dollars for each of these TIGs. So each of these TIGs has a separate bucket for MAM dollars that they implement projects, science-based projects out of, and it's with these dollars through the region-wide TIG that this project has come to fruition. Did I say that correctly? Some allocations. So with that, that's where we got to this point from MAM dollars through region-wide. Turn it over to John, let him provide the connection to what's been done, Louisiana TIG, and the efforts in the state.
Great. Thanks, Maury, and welcome, board members. I appreciate the opportunity to talk about the Avian Data Monitoring Portal. This, as well as several other items that are going to be referenced in this presentation, really highlights the collaborative nature that we have with CPRA, as well as other members within these TIGs for accomplishing many longstanding needs that were brought forth tied to the Deepwater Horizon incident. And what I'm hoping that you're going to take from that is our ability to not only address the needs that we identified first and foremost with the spill, but also the fact that we were designing things with the capacity towards addressing things that can handle things way into the future. So we're looking at data-driven means towards informing directives that are going to be beneficial for a lot of the key initiatives for CPRA as well as wildlife and fisheries. So we start off, one dark slide, but certainly this is the origin of this was a large and pervasive spill, impacted a great deal of coastal Louisiana and the broader Gulf of Mexico. Commensurate restoration, which Glenn and Maury have characterized as very, very challenging. And for folks within the avian community, wildlife community, it's only 3 words with a question mark, but it's very, very difficult to start, and that's where to begin. And our team decided to be intentional and begin with the end in mind. And what does that mean? So at that point, we want to be able to, based on this planning, to provide specific and detailed information on how to design these habitats. We wanted to generate real-world guidance for CPRA restoration teams throughout all the project phases, as well as develop comprehensive, rigorous, and repeatable monitoring methodologies, some of which I'll be characterizing with the Avian Data Portal. And that information goes through for planning, adaptive management, as well as for reporting. And as Maury touched on, these efforts were supported by a broad coalition, that being the region-wide and the Louisiana TIGs, as well as a host of collaborators, of which I'd like to recognize the Water Institute and Calibri Ecological Consulting as major drivers towards getting at the technology that you're going to be seeing today. Closer to home, for wildlife and fisheries, the end goal for us was to bolster our capacity for restoration, conservation, and adaptive management of avian resources across a broad geographic area. But this also, in partnership with CPRA, integrates with key initiatives that have been discussed today and will be continued to discuss. So addressing today's issues, but also with an eye on promoting tomorrow's solutions. And so how do we go about this? Well, there's checks and balances that we have, and that was identifying need, not want. If we get into wants, we're going to be here for a very, very long time. So this was a very targeted conversation. We had to not just talk about these activities, but actually invest in them. And that goes towards the collaborative nature that I spoke to earlier, as well as our ability to come back and say that we have not just talked about it, but that we've addressed it. And we've got clear methods and deliverables that we can share with folks that provide value on a host of different levels. So I'm going to run through this briefly. So identifying our priorities, certainly mentioned Deepwater Horizon and understanding your history. No one likes self-reflection because it can be very difficult and painful at times. But what it did for us is it identified the areas that we needed to address in order to not only talk about restoration for the future, but also to get preparation because we know that there's going to be other oil spills that are coming into play. And from that, we were able to clearly define what our goals and objectives are, something that is sometimes an overlooked thing. Because without them, you can't have a clear and connective roadmap. And when you have that, you have the ability to come through and bolster stakeholder engagement, which for what we do is critical. And seeing all of the way the coast is being represented, I've talked to a number of folks here as far as how these types of investments are going to bolster the types of habitat that's beneficial for things like resilience in the coastal zone, but also providing fantastic benefits for our natural resources. We then wanted to invest, and that was into comprehensive, rigorous, and repeatable monitoring methodologies that ultimately, at the end, got us down to the level of detail that we had the ability to go through and characterize how many nests are being generated throughout the entire coastline and the species that we have. And it also provides ways for adaptive management and how we would target resources thereof. But ultimately, at the end, I get to that deliverable, and that's our ability to clearly convey restoration success to diverse stakeholders. And I think often in the field that I work in, that's something that we don't spend enough time in, because ultimately, at the end of the day, this has to come down to the street level, where we have the ability to talk with anyone, from a kid that's writing a book report all the way to a peer-reviewed researcher, as well as a board like you making decisions about what's going to be going on for the protection of our natural resources. So at this point, I'm going to see if I can map out with our technological here, and I'm going to open this up. So this is the Avian Data Monitoring Portal. It's accessed by avianmonitoring.com. We tried to make it simple because when we started off, it was really a mouthful and no one could handle it. But ultimately, again, what this is decided for is a broad stakeholder engagement. We wanted the ability, if a kid had to do a book report on Queen Bess, all the way to a peer-reviewed researcher that was trying to gather all of the information that we have, which, by the way, this incorporates information from 2010 to current day. It's the most comprehensive database that we have for colonial water birds in the Gulf of Mexico, and is frequently utilized on multiple fronts, be it birds as well as a host of other things that I'll talk about later. But we get into the aerial surveys on this page. We talk about here as far as the data availability. Again, I characterize the 2010 and onward and some of the methodologies and ways that you can look at this information. I'm going to skip over dashboard. We've also got the Explorer that highlights all the information. All of this is completely free for download based on a grant that was secured through Amazon. We also highlight, if you're interested in this, as far as the protocols that we have for these aerial surveys and future directions, which I'll be touching on later. But the area I wanted to touch on, of course, maybe we can, all right, I prepped for this. So let's do that, and slideshow, and case the demo didn't work. So what you're going to find in this dashboard feature is when you come onto it, you're going to see several different concepts right here because it's not connected to the internet. I'm just going to sort of verbalize this, but you've got the ability to go and by the touch of a button, look at years, states. This incorporates all of the Gulf of Mexico states that Maury characterized for the region-wide, georegions, colonies, species. And the nice thing about that is that 90% of the questions that I get could be easily handled by this bar graph. Honestly, when we have projects like Queen Bess and what have you, the number one question that I get is, well, how are the birds doing and how many nests were generated? You now have the access to the same information that I have, which I think is critical. The other part of this that I wanted to pass along right here is when you select, and I use Queen Bess as an example, the portal goes through and prioritizes the 50 most relevant aerial pictures as well as dotting. And when I say dotting, what that means is the actual going in and determination of individual nests. This methodology has a resolution of 1 centimeter square. So we have the ability to look down and identify these nests to species as well as for some of them stage them out accordingly. And ultimately, again, looking at this from the perspective of multiple users, the general public, which has been prioritized for this, I think is number one, but also our ability to come back for future oil spills and be able to characterize to the nest the type of productivity that's done for future restoration. Also, our ability to come through and characterize to everyone, all of our stakeholders, when we talk about at the end of Deepwater Horizon, what benefits have been generated by that. All of this is going to be visual. All of this is going to be able to provide it that anyone will have access to this and will be able to tell the story, which is what we were wanting in the first place. And so I'm going to do this. And okay. So if we had been able to look at this, these are the types of dotting images that you would see. This is a section right here on Raccoon Island, of which you're going to see some symbols that highlight Sandwich and Royal Terns. So this is the past, and this is the future. The future being that all of these nests are now geo-rectified. We have the technology in place where we're not only just going and gathering this information in a static situation, but we have the ability for this information to be incorporated, which again, going back to a statement I made earlier, plays well when we're talking about key initiatives within CPRA, when we're talking about BICM, when we're talking about shoreline loss, when we're talking about habitat analysis, and how these birds are utilizing these habitats over time. It goes into informing a host of different things that I'll be touching on in a second. And one of those areas that we wanted to touch on, and I felt that a picture was worth 1,000 words here, is this idea of high elevation acquisition. When you would go on our current site, what you're going to find is, say for a Queen Bess or the Chandelures or what have you, you'd have maybe 150 different images at this point. Ultimately now, for a new investment that we have, all of these islands are going to be photomosaic and georeferenced, so that if you're talking, Ms. Cormier, and you want to look at Rabbit Island, you're going to be able to look at 2010 all the way to current day, be able to understand the birds that are there and how they're utilizing the habitats as well as fueling adaptive management. But here's a showcase of what it looks like in the plane as we're going through.
We're flying out of New Orleans today with our partners at Calibri Ecological Consulting to test a new method of data collection for aerial surveys of colonial waterbird populations. While having a photographer hang out of the belly of the plane to take photos during flight is a good way to get focused images of nesting birds, these end up being oblique or angled photos. We've actually mounted a camera that takes vertical aerial photos and talks with the airplane's computer to attach metadata such as altitude and angles and coordinates to the photos being taken. This additional data will help us to provide more specific analyses of nesting habitat use in addition to changes to bird populations over time. This can then be used by our state and federal government partners to make more informed coastal restoration decisions
and we'll cut from there, just to give you an idea of what it looks like in there. But, going back to a statement I made as far as the street level, as far as what we're looking at for avian restoration, what we're looking at is one-stop shopping for our stakeholders, the ability to go in and get clear and easily consumable information to let them know how their resources are being utilized towards restoring their natural resources. And again, I reference avianmonitoring.com. Another collaborative effort, that being avian guidance document. The short way of passing this along is bird people and engineers have a hard time communicating with one another. So we essentially generated a Rosetta Stone that translates avian ecology into coastal engineering. And by having information that is georectified like we have for this, as well as secret of marsh birds and other activities ongoing, we have the ability to bring this to CPRA when we're going through and identifying the projects that we'd like to see, and we're able to communicate effectively. We're able to pass along the types of habitat features, the how high, how wide, for how long. And that is critical, we found, in being able to not only accomplish what we want to do, but to do it in a timely manner, because we all recognize that these resources are challenged in certain areas. And that highlights some of the restoration ongoing. Again, just to give folks a highlight, going from east to west, the Chandelures are in engineering design. North Breton has been completed. Queen Bess has been completed. At the Houma Navigational Canal, that will go to construction very, very soon. We've got Raccoon Island here in engineering design, as well as Rabbit Island, which has been completed. Again, with this information giving us the ability for adaptive management, which comes with a host of different ways and means. Ultimately, what we're looking at is utilizing these data, these investments, towards figuring out how we can extend the benefits of these investments. And I've got an example that I can present here, that being Queen Bess. This is the south end of Queen Bess. It's the highest area. It was designed for ground nesting birds. Due to Hurricane Ida and various other aspects, we had a great deal of vegetative encroachment that went in. These birds, terns, and such don't like that type, so we went through, based on this, seeing the fact that we were not getting near enough terns in this area. We did herbicide treatments with CPRA and our contractors, as well as a prescribed burn. And this is what Queen Bess looked like this year. You'll notice all of those big pools of white, those are all royal and sandwich terns, and we're talking about thousands of nests that have been generated, all of which comes from investments that we have tied to the avian data monitoring portal. Beyond that, we are looking at leveraging this fantastic investment that we have for emerging challenges like offshore wind, of which now we have an understanding and ability to go through and clearly highlight where our targeted resources are located. And then we have the ability to balance that with additional targeted data acquisition and risk. So we have an understanding and an ability to communicate effectively with our DNR partners, as well as with operators when we're talking about this new and emerging area. So in conclusion, the portal was developed to address identified need at the time, going back to my statements about Deepwater Horizon. And through targeted investment, trustees now have a comprehensive means and to easily convey these restoration benefits. And to be clear, for the storytelling of Deepwater Horizon, this data set is going to be the principal means in which all of the colonial water bird restoration is going to be described. So Louisiana was a leader and continues to be in this area. And so with that, we're addressing today's needs, but also I hope you're seeing when you go to avianmonitoring.com that with everything going on, that this has the capacity to support future opportunities, consensus building, and real-world decision-making. And with that, I'll take any questions.
All right, gentlemen, great presentation. Anyone have any thoughts or comments? Okay. Mr. Bosworth.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Bourgeois. John, on behalf of the department, I'd like to thank you and your team and the folks at CPRA for picking this up, taking this disaster and going out and getting this data put compiling it into a comprehensive program that makes it easily accessible to the public and puts it in a fashion that decision makers like us on this board can take it and make decisions, like you said, having the foresight into the future. So I want to thank you all for going out and doing that. This is an excellent project, and I'm very excited about reviewing this data.
Thank you.
All right, anyone else? The board's clear. Thank you, gentlemen. And we'll move on to item number 10, the 2025 parish matching requests for proposals. We have Mr. Brandon Champagne with CPRA. Okay, Brandon.
All righty. Good morning, board. My name is Brandon Champagne. I'm a supervisor at CPRA. Today, here to present the FY 2025 parish matching RFP. You may remember me from the May board meeting this year where I announced the awards for FY 24. So now I'm back to present the RFP for the next round. So just to jump right into it. So again, this is a continuation of last year's parish matching awards. Really, you'll notice it's a very similar process to what we used last year. Really, the biggest difference that I want to note is the difference in the funding sources. So whereas for last parish matching award, we had a couple different funding sources, this year it's just going to be Go Mesa funding, and it's going to be in the amount of $6 million. Last year we had $7 million total, so I just wanted to really note that Go Mesa will be funding these projects. Mostly just because sometimes we have some funding restrictions that we want to address, so I want to make sure that to note that change. And again, these projects will be addressing coastal restoration and resilience needs in the different parishes. Another thing I wanted to note is this is a distinct program from the previous Restore Parish Matching Program. So again, different funding sources, and these projects won't necessarily be beholden to those Restore requirements. So a little bit on eligibility. These projects will be restricted to the 20 parishes found in the LDENR coastal zones. In the coastal zone, in the event that there's a project that kind of borders two parishes, we ask that one parish kind of act as the lead and submit those proposals together. In addition to that, we do encourage other non-parish partners to be included. We always like to see collaboration on these projects, and so we just, again, ask that the parishes kind of take the lead on these projects. Another requirement is that the projects and the proposals must include match. The amount and type of match is up to the parishes, but we do really like to see these projects being leveraged, these project funding being leveraged in different types of ways, so that we like to see the match in these projects. Some examples we'll see include not only restoration, but also non-structural drainage improvements, and again, those different types of leverages that we like to see in this program. Lastly, another requirement, this is an implementation program, so we do like to see and require construction as part of the proposal. We are fine with funding some E&D, but that also has to include some construction component for these projects. So just to list some of the project types, I made a list. You can see it's pretty exhaustive, but I want to mention that obviously always happy to chat with parishes to see what other kind of projects they want to see in their areas. I won't read off the list there. This is just some examples that we've seen in the past, but I've included some pictures from a similar program, the Conservation and Restoration Partnership Fund program, one being the Sekofa Wetland Park over in New Orleans. It's acting as a stormwater system to help with stormwater and drainage, and also have park features. In addition to that, we have the TNC Oyster Reef project over in West Cove in Cameron Parish. So that's another example of some shoreline protection, living shoreline, oyster reef placement that we like to see in these types of projects. So a little bit on the process here. So again, today we'll be announcing the RFP for that. Those proposals will be due in December of this year. We'll be evaluating those with a team of scientists, engineers, and other staff at CPRA. We'll be looking at things like how far do these projects work with the master plan, what kind of matching funds, what kind of feasibility do the projects have, as well as what kind of benefits do we get, whether that's restoration or resilience benefits. And then lastly, of course, synergy with other efforts in the area. And so those are the considerations we'll be having for those projects. We'll be announcing that hopefully at the March 2025 board meeting, those awards. So just to get into the proposals a little bit, really the big takeaway here is that we like to see how these project features and what their purpose is and how that purpose is tied to those considerations that we'll be thinking about. So really another big thing we like to see is the budget summary. It can be really difficult to kind of have an idea of what the project budget will be, but we really like to see where the funding will be going towards so that we can make sure that we really use this money in the best possible way. And that's pretty much it. I'll be here to answer any questions. Obviously, you have my contact up there, my email and my phone number. I also have hard copies if anybody really wants a hard copy to take home. Have some. Happy to help answer any questions.
Yeah, Mr. Glenn Leday.
Thank you, Brandon. Thank you for that. Just to thank you and the staff at CPRA for all the hard work you put into this program. I think just today we mentioned at least 3 successful parish matching projects, one of the phases of Rockefeller, Lake Leary, as well as the Tangipahoa project we featured, the shoreline protection project. So you can see by leveraging all those dollars, we're putting good projects on the ground. So just thank you for that, and excited to see this round come out, and looking forward to the awards in March. Thanks.
Thanks.
The board being clear, thank you very much, Mr. Champagne. And federal update, Neil McMillan, DENR. Mr. McMillan.
Well, awesome. Well, good day. I'm not sure if it's morning or afternoon, but ready to rock and roll, and thanks for the opportunity to discuss kind of what's happening in Congress as we look ahead to what can happen at the end of this year, which is the end of this 118th Congress. And the real question is, like, I guess, what will Congress do during this kind of election cycle, and how will it impact us? So we'll start with the WRDA, which is the Water Resource Development Act that guides Army Corps policy. This has been passed for 10 years in a row, every other year, so once a Congress. And it looks like we're on good track. So since I last presented, the House passed their version with a very strong vote, 359 to 13. And then the Senate surprisingly passed it unanimously about a week later. So both bills have the endorsement of each chamber, and so the committees are trying to merge the differences and through an informal conference process. And so that's getting it passed before August recess is a big milestone that shows they're definitely on time, and should be able to get that baked in time for an end of the year opportunity. You'll see on the key win side, these are provisions we have in both bills, look very solid. On the provisions to finalize, that's something that we have a provision in either one version or another, or maybe some different versions in each bill. The delegation knows kind of where CPRA stands on all these, and hoping that and the committees do as well. So hopefully we'll get some good wins through that process. On revenue sharing, we have some good news announced. Senator Cassidy negotiated with the committee that was moving a permitting bill to secure a vote on the RISE Act. This is something that happened in 2022. It passed unanimously through this committee, but the committee has not acted on it so far. Looks like that'll occur next week. Hasn't been formally announced, but looks like it'll be probably right before they leave for the pre-election recess. Hearing good things that probably will be a voice vote, which means not strong opposition. There may be a couple comments about this or that against it, but it seems like Chairman Manchin's going to let it go, which is definitely great, and will kind of put us in better position to get that done at the end of the year. And then I put up this chart of the committee members. Most of these members have voted or not opposed the RISE Act in the past. There's only one new member, Senator Hawley. But then I just wanted to categorize, like, yes, as a Shores Coalition, we've met and laid a lot of groundwork over the years. So it's a very familiar issue. The people running this bill don't feel like we have to start from ground zero. They feel like people are familiar with it. I think it should go smoothly. Now, there are offices we haven't met with for various reasons, sometimes because they're already supportive, or sometimes, certain members, it's best not to just remind them about oil and gas and just lay low. So it wasn't that we ignored anybody. There's strategy here, but the main message is that the Shores Coalition has done a good job of greasing the skids and really telling the story. So pleased to see that and expect a good result. Will be something to be proud of as a coalition. Also, we as in the nation had an offshore wind lease sale off the Central Atlantic. This was the first major sale under this administration over there. And we had, solid interest, about $93 million in bids. About $70 million of that would be available for revenue sharing. The industry sale, that was pretty encouraging. It's not in the billions like the New York bite was several years ago, but definitely something to pay attention to. And then there's a lease sale coming up in Oregon and in the Gulf of Maine in October. The Gulf of Maine area is very excited. That's Massachusetts, New Hampshire, Maine. They're pretty excited. And then the Oregon folks are kind of more wary about it. They feel like it's not all their questions are answered. So we'll see how that responds. But as each one of these goes forward, that creates more money left on the table for more partners. So it's something we definitely track. Mr. Lede covered this disaster request timeline really well. It was granted yesterday for 8 parishes, but one thing is that we've had some disasters lately that have had some friction between certain states, and we had great state, federal delegation and federal partnership, and we avoided that, which is fantastic. I want to talk about, Congress funding the government, because we're coming on the end of the fiscal year, October 1st. It's something we periodically talk about because it really drives a lot of major legislation. Currently, it's not really an energy and environmental push. It's about, do we fund the government, into next year with the next president's in charge, or do we do it in December and let Congress respond to the election cycle? Speaker Johnson wants to push it into the next year, maybe thinking he's going to have a better negotiating hand. His opponents don't want that. And it looks like they're going to have a vote today. This slide was made before they announced it, but they'll have a vote today on this 6-month plan, see if it goes forward, deals with some immigration and non-citizen voting. But the important thing is whether it's this CR, maybe one that happens before Christmas, as they're trying to replenish the FEMA disaster aid funding. There is funding there, but they project that it'll be drawn down and in the negative pretty soon. So we'll see how much is put in there so that we, don't have a shortfall in one of that hurdles. And then if he's successful in putting this into next year, there's only going to be one major bill that'll be passed. That'll be the defense bill. So that would be the vehicle that anything like a WRDA or a RISE Act or a BREEZE Act, that's what we would try to push on. If they extend it to December, that gives us kind of 2 bites at the apple for extra legislation. So a lot of the legislators want more opportunities, but then, it's big picture, big politics stuff. So we'll see how that goes. But regardless, we think WRDA and the RISE Act or BREEZE Act deserve passing. And then there's a new bill that's not fully introduced. It's introduced as a concept and had a hearing. It's what's called a discussion draft, so an initial bill so they could get feedback and then introduce something that would be on stronger footing. And this was done by Congressman Graves. And it essentially creates through the Office of NOAA Fisheries a CPRA type program that would do both protection, such as levees, and different restoration like marsh creation, oyster reefs. You see the list, beneficial uses, plantings. And it proposes authorizing $500 million a year for 10 years to do this. And that's a big proposal, especially starting from ground zero, but it's really trying to mimic what the Great Lakes region has, what the Everglades region has, the Chesapeake has, like these nationally significant ecosystems that have either multiple jurisdictions or like the Everglades, kind of irreplaceable, unique. I certainly think everyone here agrees that Louisiana could deserve that. And so there's some good conversation. I think both Republicans and Democrats supported the concept of protecting Louisiana. There's a lot of folks that had come down to Louisiana even recently that Mr. Ledet presented in front of, that they talked about at their visit, and the impression they've had from flying over. Some of the provisions that would make these projects smoother, like having a category exclusion for essential fish habitat or NEPA for certain projects, that's something that'll have to be hashed out. There's some discomfort on that. But overall, it's a pretty positive hearing. And then Steve Cochran, who formerly, many of you know, who directed the Restore the Mississippi River Coalition, he testified in his private capacity in favor of the bill and made a pretty strong case about the national significance of Louisiana's coast. And so I think that's something that needs to be thought of. We'll see how fast it can advance this year, and definitely something that would be awesome to pass, and getting NOAA involved to a greater degree sounds like a good thing. And that concludes my presentation, Chairman Dove. Happy to answer questions.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. McMillan. Any questions with the members?
Just one quick one.
Mr. Bourgeois.
Yeah, so in Congressman Graves' bill, is that a Louisiana-only project in National Marine Fisheries, or does it have other possibilities in other areas?
The congressional findings are almost exclusively about the importance of Louisiana, but then the way it's framed would be something kind of in the estuary, estuarine region. So I think you could argue that some different Gulf states could participate, but it's...
Anything under National Marine Fisheries jurisdiction would be eligible, I suppose?
It's not really tied to their trust resources like you sometimes see. So it's not written to have a fish impact for each project. But it puts the NOAA Fisheries Director in charge of that program. I think to, kind of deal with the permitting side of the NOAA facility. So I'm not exactly sure why they didn't have this NOAA administrator do that, but it's mostly Louisiana, but you could see as Mississippi or Alabama could probably come up with some regional benefit proposal.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. McMillan, and that's the board is clear. Thank you very much for your time, effort, and great presentation. And with that, we have one public comment from Bart Black with the Terrebonne Parish Consolidated Government. Mr. Black.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, Mark Black, I'm the Coastal Restoration Director for Terrebonne Parish. Earlier this month, the technical committee, the CPRA Technical Committee, voted to place 3 marsh creation projects in the Terrebonne Basin on the critical watch list because of the inability to secure the land rights for those 3 projects. That concerns me. In addition, there are 2 other marsh creation ridge restoration projects in Terrebonne that have been significantly delayed because of the inability to secure land rights. I think that very soon those 2 projects are also going to go onto the critical watch list. The problem here, basically, in my opinion, is the oil and gas lawsuits and these particular property owners who are involved in that as defendants, more or less. And so what I'm asking you to do as a board is to see if you can move the needle towards resolution of those lawsuits so that we're not stymied anymore with necessary marsh creation projects in Terrebonne Parish. I mean, we're dead in the water right now. And if we lose these projects, that is very significant. Some of those are in the eastern part of the parish where the situation is dire. So that's my ask, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Ward, thank you very much, Mr. Black, and it was a pleasure working with you for 8 years with Terrebonne Parish. I'm glad you came before the committee.
Thank you, sir.
And we'll take all that under advisement.
Sure.
Thank you very much. With that, if there's any other members wishing to speak, a motion to adjourn. So moved. In the second, unanimous. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, and we'll see you in 30 days.